quote, try and be more careful after she forgot to pay his cell phone bill.
Mom, the phone company called today about my cell phone bill.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot.
No, Mom, I'm not mad, but you have to stay on top of these things, you know.
I know,
You can't keep waiting until the last minute like this. Well, I don't want to have to keep reminding you every month. You know, I need my phone. I use it every day. I need my phone. I'm constantly using it.
I'm so bad. I'm really sorry. I'll get on it today.
All right, you know, just so you know that, you know, this really easy thing you can do, you know, there's this online auto pay. It just deducts from your bank account every month.
Yeah,
quite easy.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
It's fine. Just don't let it become a pattern. You know, I know you can do better than this.
Okay. I promise. I'll get on it today. Okay.
This is the Onion News Network.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number for you to take that control. 603-283-6160, and Free Talk Live, there's no taboo topics here. You can talk about whatever's on your mind. With you in the studio to talk to, it's me, Bonnie.
Riley.
And Stu.
And one of the things that I wanted to start off talking about is this article from Wall Street Journal, and just the topic in general, that the United States is beginning to send immigrants to Guantanamo Bay. And that really scares me for these people. I don't really believe that it's going to be the case that, they're going to get treated exactly like the black site prisoner people that are at Guantanamo Bay. I feel like it's just like a temporary holding thing, but how terrifying. Like, to even be in the United States' custody and being sent to Guantanamo Bay is terrifying.
Sure, and Guantanamo Bay has a reputation of being a torture prison, as we've talked about on the show many times.
Yes.
Yeah, I think most people that have heard of Guantanamo Bay have heard of at least a few of the horrifying things that go on there.
And but Obama was supposed to close it, but never did. So, I mean, I guess if it's still open, it's Obama's fault.
Yeah, I remember he specifically failed to close it after he promised to. Does anybody know if, did Trump ever promise that, or was he just pro Guantanamo Bay this whole time?
I don't know if I can't recall him ever mentioning anything about Guantanamo Bay. So if listeners know, they can call us at 603-283-6160 and correct the record. I don't recall. I think he's of the opinion that Guantanamo Bay is a good place for prisoners. Obviously, he thinks that because he's sending migrants or immigrants, whatever you want to call them, there.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is a ploy to kind of scare the other people who might want to come here over the borders. Like, you might end up at Guantanamo Bay from now on if you end up crossing the border. That is so terrifying. If people don't know why it's so terrifying, it is a place where they have tortured many people, and people will get sent there with no official charge and no official release date and have no idea why they're there, just because somebody in the United States government decided that they were a suspect. There's no such thing as due process for these people.
No.
They're just waiting possibly for the rest of their lives, and they do get tortured there. It's insanely hot in the summer. It's in Cuba, and they are in these metal cages, and there is not a lot of room for each prisoner. It's described as really dirty most of the time, and the guards are extremely cruel. And I read a story on the air from Al Jazeera, I think it was maybe 2 years ago, about this guy just describing being force-fed at Guantanamo Bay, and I cried on the air, because I think that's the only time I've ever cried on the air, and, like, my husband went to prison. Like, I think that that's the only time, because it was just so insanely. I just hate the idea of being sent somewhere, having no idea why you're there, and then also being tortured. And when I first actually heard this, I didn't really know what is the torturous part of being force fed. I almost thought that, oh, it's just like you get foods pumped into you, and like maybe the worst part is getting the feeding tube in, but they purposely force fed him way past the capacity of his stomach, so like this liquid food was coming out of his nose.
Oh no.
And
that's horrible.
Then instantly he was throwing up and the people were laughing.
Wow.
Insane. It's so insane. He said it was like the most pain he's ever been in when it came out of his nose and face and everything, and the throwing up, and just they forcibly put a tube down his throat, and they didn't do it like a very nice nurse or something.
Well, that's the kind of place where they'll, if they can link you to any kind of terrorist group or, you know, working for any kind of a enemy regime, you're subjected to what they call torture and rendition. And they'll do all kinds of horrifying stuff. I've heard of rumors, I don't know if, I think it might even be substantiated, where they were using drills, just going right into people's skulls with them.
Oh my god.
Okay, that's really sad and insane. It's terrible.
The pictures that have come out of that place are not a lot better than that anyways. Naked human pyramids and all kinds.
Ew.
Yeah.
That's really weird, and sounds like a humiliation thing, like how those people...
It's like a prison experiment fed to the maximum.
The joys of being a prison guard is you get to torture people to the maximum if your prison warden or your head guard gives you the permission to, and people will carry that out.
Yeah. If you want to be a psychopathic torturer and harm people, the best job for you to get is a prison guard, whether Guantanamo Bay or not. But
right.
So, one thing, or I definitely wanted to get into this. Maybe we should just quickly mention a bit about Ian's hearing as well. So, Ian Freeman, one of the two founders of the show. And my husband, he went to prison in 2023 for selling Bitcoin, and there's an update in the case. It's honestly a small update, so we'll get into that. But first, I wanted to go to the phones, since that's what Free Talk Live is all about. We have Dana in Michigan. Dana, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind? Uh-oh, don't hear you. Oh, wait, I clicked the wrong button. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. Okay. It isn't often that I do this, but, it's a new day and age where you can't get canceled for being honest or giving your opinion. I highly recommend that everybody tonight get their facts straight before you say things over the radio waves. First and foremost, the drill to the head was what ISIS was doing to children whose parent or parents helped the U.S. soldiers.
Let me just say that these things are hard to substantiate, and it's like the babies being thrown out of the incubators that they used to justify going into the Middle East in the first place. That never happened. So you see what I'm saying is, and that's why I mentioned that I hadn't personally.
No, when you've got multiple people coming back and saying this stuff, these are not just boots on the ground, but they're not just the enlisted guys, but they're officers. This is stuff when you see people having limbs chopped off because they help the U.S. Why would they chop their own limbs off? Why on ISIS? These people are really bad people. The people in Guantanamo...
Well, Obama created ISIS, so there's that too.
Yes, he did. So I'm gonna forgive you for the comment about the drill, but the drill was used on children. They drilled in their legs, their bones. They did it through their skulls, and they did it before they killed the parent, usually a man, the father. They killed everyone in the family before him, so he would suffer the most extreme emotional pain before they tortured him to death. These are not
it's possible
nice
it took.
people.
It's possible that took part in both places, and
Yeah, it's
it would
also
be really
possible
hard
they're
to
both
discover
made up.
the absolute truth on that unless you were there.
It always seems that whenever something is made up to incite a war or incite, any kind of even just hatred, so that way you're more likely to support a war, children are brought in. And I'm not saying that means I know either one is a lie, because I wasn't there for them. This is one of those things that genuinely, I don't think anybody knows the answer if it's true or not.
Well,
of course, it could be true that the United States government came out and said, hey, it's not true that we did this at a black site where we could do whatever we want. They can say that. And maybe they did say that they didn't do the drilling, but that doesn't mean that you, Dana, or Stu really knows for sure what happened. And these people are absolutely torturing people there. That's a fact. So it just really doesn't shock me. I've also heard of the cartel doing that to people to kill them. Somebody that I knew somebody that got killed in that way in southern Mexico, where it's really rare. So I don't know.
But and Bonnie, I don't disagree with that. But I'm going to trust someone that now have our troops, one or two or maybe a dozen over years or different wars, committed atrocities, probably. But
yep, my grandpa admitted it to me. He killed a whole group of school children in Vietnam just because he was ordered to, and it ruined his whole entire life. And my mom.
Right. But I'm going to say, to be on the safe side, I'm going to trust our guys over anyone that was in Guantanamo because they were part of ISIS or worked with them. These are bad people. Now let's talk about the illegals. Those illegals, everyone that was sent to Guantanamo, these were not just regular people that came over the border. These were people that were absolutely came in with one or multiple rapes and murders in their own country. These are not people we want holed up somewhere in the event that they could escape back into the interior of the country. They put them there for the safety of the citizens. And it's not like we didn't know this wasn't going to happen. I want them out of here. Ian and I and Mark and I had a very in-depth conversation many years ago. I wish Mark was on again tonight. But Mark and I had a real, because Ian just was like open borders. And Mark was like, open borders, no welfare state. And I agreed with that because if you remove the incentives, and when I say welfare, I'm not talking the $5,000 to $9,000 they got on a debit card when they over 10 million came up here in the last 4 years. And yes, it's been over 10 million. They think it's closer. It's between 15 and 20 million Biden let in. But they were given debit cards with I worked for the Fed, so there are some things I know on insider information. They were given debit cards, they were fed, and yes, the vets were kicked out of hotels onto the street, our American citizens, so that they could house illegals. They were throwing tons. There's pictures all over the internet. They didn't like our American food. There were dumpsters, not trash cans, dumpsters filled with 3 meals a day of all the trash, all the good food they were throwing out.
It's the seed oils.
So
I've heard of that kind of stuff.
Let me say one more thing, Bonnie. So these are the worst of the worst. But Trump ran on this, and we don't want him here. And so Mark and I agreed. When I said to Mark, for clarification, I told Ian this too, take away these credit cards or debit cards didn't even exist when Ian, Mark, and I had this in-depth discussion because Ian and I really got into it. This was way before you, Bonnie. This was years ago. So that being said, Mark, the town person in the room, said, okay, let's go through what the exact problem is. I never even could have imagined they would take my money, my tax dollars, and give it to people who already committed a federal crime by coming in here illegally and not through the ports of call. Back then, it was free hospital and they were put in Section 8 housing, and they got all their kids got school. And so Mark and I agreed. I went that far to his side that if everything, every stinking little thing was taken away, then I might think about open borders. And that includes the charitable food trucks that all these churches, they have food trucks in their parking lot. And I know my particular religious denomination does this overwhelmingly. They're probably one of the biggest feeders in the country to poor people. But it's not the poor people in the church parishes that are coming, nor is it even other denomination poor people. It's the illegals that are coming. Do you know that over 67% of all illegals in this country, not just the rapists and the killers are on welfare, so at least one form of welfare, and it's usually two or more. That's what I've got a problem with.
I think that's that pretty much sums it up. The problem isn't immigration. The problem is all these strange government incentives that get put in place.
Yeah, I feel the same way about white people. I don't have a problem with white people. I have a problem with the ones being on welfare not doing any kind of
their heroin, their cocaine, their drugs,
not doing any kind of productive jobs, being, on the dole of other people. I feel the same way. I believe now, and I used to feel a bit differently, but I really think now that the thing is, if we're going to have a country, but it's not that I'm saying I think there should be, but as long as there is, I think it would be best to focus on ending welfare. But it doesn't really matter what I think, because it's not going to happen. Trump's not going to get rid of welfare. He's going to put these weird little band-aids on, send people that, first of all, I have to say, just because somebody has a charge, that means nothing to me. At the point where, in my life, where I've been through my husband being called a scammer by the federal government just so they can write these little articles, make themselves look good. I really don't care what any government says about another person. Unless there is some kind of proof you can actually pull up somewhere, I'm not just going to say, oh, well, these are bad people. These
That's
are
right.
30,000 bad people.
Until they do a bad thing, that you need stopped, it's really kind of, it's just hearsay.
And that's what due process is all about. Cops aren't allowed to punish people for something that they're suspected of doing. They're supposed to be presumed innocent. And the thing about it is, I really think that there are some bad people who are in a situation where it's easier to escape the spotlight, like cockroaches don't want to be in the light, by coming to the United States, because of the fact that they're getting treated it's so strange. They're getting treated so specially, and I didn't know about this stuff, because the thing that's weird is I dated and married an illegal immigrant, and he not only just wasn't on welfare. One time we thought about it, and I looked into it for him, and it was going to be impossible to sign him up for anything. There are these specific things that people are getting brought into the country with these deals.
Right. And if the government, if one of these NGOs came to the American government and said, give us some poor people, we'll relocate them in another country and pay for them to have a nice existence there, then I'm sure the U.S. would be like, oh, cool, we got some people we'd like to get rid of, and they, wouldn't be sending engineers and the smartest people. So the argument does make sense that, if it's government who's deciding who gets to take part in these NGO programs to relocate.
My ex with a college degree, an insane work ethic, just like a normal Catholic dude that had no charges at all in his whole life. He just decided to come here because he wanted to make his own wealth and not rely on his family. It was really tight knit. He had just wanted to do that, and so he came over here illegally. But I think the bigger problem is something I had no idea about until a bit before the election. I watched these documentaries about this one was specifically focusing on Haitians doing this, but they get dropped off altogether. They immediately walk from where they're dropped off to a job. they all go together in groups, walk to this factory and have this job already. It's so obvious what's happening, in my opinion, that there is like, I don't know what NGO means, but like these
are non-governmental organizations, or they're like nonprofits, or
it seems like that's what's going on. And one of the things is kind of like what Dana was saying. She said she worked for the feds and she has info on this. It sounds believable because in this documentary, this guy, and I'm not going to remember who it was, he was doing a expose about this city or town in Pennsylvania that just got way more Haitians than even already the people that already live there. And about how it went like really downhill because of the fact that like they don't know how to drive and they were just given cars, stuff like that. And so in that documentary, the guy interviewed a woman who actually works for the welfare office there, and she like is one of the people that's always been from there. She's born there and everything, and she said she can see in their accounts and she can see that they will get deposits of like $10,000, and she said she doesn't have the ability to see where it's coming from, so she genuinely doesn't know, but she can see their balances and like deposits into their like cards, whatever they have. It's so I used to think that
the way that works is someone like, so something like USAID, which has been in the news a lot lately, will get a big grant and they'll give it to a George Soros group, and this George Soros group will pay, they'll go to the Haitian government and say, we need a bunch of relocations to America.
And why?
Because that's part of how you destabilize a country, to make it susceptible for hardcore state communism.
Wow. I do kind of believe that.
So what I'll say about immigration and welfare is that I really don't care if a Catholic church organization or a Mormon church organization or a religious organization wants to bring people over, sponsor people to come over. What I have a problem with is what Dana was talking about, is the government stealing money from you and I and handing it to people who, haven't earned it or are just coming here and not doing anything with their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of look at those as separate issues. You're being stolen from. Yeah. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And then to say that you have a problem with how the plunder is used doesn't make any sense. It's plunder. Obviously, they're not going to use it well.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from on that. I would think that, ending a welfare system from the government side would be the best thing, because we're obviously being stolen from. People won't acknowledge that, taxes are plunder or theft or extortion until they actually realize that if they don't pay them, a group of strangers is going to come to their house with guns and lock them in a cage.
Well, they all know this. It's called cognitive dissonance, where you hold two opposing viewpoints as being true.
Yeah, and they just care about, the plunder that I'm giving to the government, it's going to my favorite programs, rather than looking at it and saying, wait a minute, I'm being stolen from, and eventually my money is going to fund something I don't like, whether it's Trump's presidency or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's just that they don't want to admit that they're scared of the thugs.
Yeah.
And so they're willing to say things like, "Well, what about my roads?"
Yeah.
In order to act like they actually believe this crap.
I actually think
but
a lot
I don't
of them,
think anybody believes it.
I think a lot of them really think that, like, that wouldn't happen to me. Even if that happened, I'd be able to talk my way out of it. If I got sent to court, this is what I'd say to the judge. They don't know how it works.
No, it's terrifying.
And how you just get steamrolled. So 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. More coming up. Thank you for the call, Dana.
This hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash masternodes. The masternodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by that treasury. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash paved the way by doing it first, nearly a decade ago. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges, including the decentralized Maya protocol, and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and use Dash. Start by learning more at dash.org. Thanks to the Dash DAO for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air. Visit dash.org to learn about Dash, dash.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Hire. China is accusing Donald Trump of weaponizing trade after he announced he's imposing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium entering the United States. The US president also says he's planning reciprocal tariffs on any country currently taxing American products. From Washington, Nick Harper reports.
There are fears now of a spiralling trade war, with Donald Trump telling reporters on Sunday on board Air Force One that on Monday he'll be announcing a new tariff, 25% on any steel and aluminium entering the United States. And he promised an announcement on reciprocal tariffs on Tuesday or Wednesday, saying it would apply to every country, adding very simply, if they charge us, we charge them.
China, though, has already imposed retaliatory tariffs on the US, hitting about $14 billion worth of goods. Beijing laid out those tariffs last week in response to the White House's decision to impose an additional 10% levy on Chinese products. Our Asia correspondent Laura Westbrook has the details.
China's measures target U.S. exports of liquefied natural gas, coal, crude oil and farm equipment, as well as some automotive goods, with levies of 10 to 15%. Delaying the start of the tariffs and the targeted approach by Beijing had been seen as creating space for negotiations to try to avert a wider trade conflict. But when the deadline passed on Sunday, there was no news of a deal, and Beijing announced the tariffs were in effect.
Hamas says it's delaying the release of Israeli hostages until further notice, accusing Israel of breaching the Gaza ceasefire agreement. The terror group claims Israel violated the deal by delaying the return of displaced persons to northern Gaza, targeting them with shelling and failing to allow the entry of humanitarian aid. Israel calls the decision itself a complete violation of the ceasefire, which began last month. 17 Israeli hostages, some dead, were still due to be released in the first phase of the ceasefire, the next swap due on Saturday. President Trump has condemned Hamas over the state of 3 Israeli hostages released last weekend, saying they were in a horrible condition. Charles Gibson is in Tel Aviv.
As well as comparing the 3 Israeli men released by Hamas to Holocaust victims, President Trump said that at some point we're going to lose our patience. All 3 were visibly gaunt as TV cameras filmed them being transferred to the Red Cross inside Gaza on Saturday. However, the Israeli government is also facing criticism over the condition of some of the Palestinian prisoners released the same day. The Palestinian Red Crescent says that 7 out of the 183 were admitted to hospital after being handed over by Israeli authorities.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com.
Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160 is the phone number you can call to bring up whatever's on your mind, have a conversation with us. You can change the topic, you can tell us what you think about what we're saying, tell us we're wrong. It doesn't matter, it's up to you because it's Free Talk Live, and that's 603-283-6160. And I'd like to thank High Flyer for being an amplifier with us here at Free Talk Live. That means that High Flyer went to amps.freetalklive.com and signed up to support the show. AMPS stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. Thanks to High Flyer and everyone who supports us. And again, that's amps.freetalklive.com if you'd like to check out the perks and benefits of becoming an amplifier. And with you on Free Talk Live tonight, you've got me, Bonnie,
Riley,
and Stu.
And we already have a caller on the line, so let's go to the phones. Greg in New York, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Hey, everybody. Yeah, on my mind, we have a very interesting government now that in different ways shows how much they are taking power. So I just, I have a few questions. Let's start with California and the water was released I found it interesting because the people in California say that it's a stunt, meaning the water was released in the north. It didn't really reach LA.
What does that mean that the water was released?
Oh, Trump made an order for the Army Corps of Engineers to release water. And the water was in the north of California, and then it flowed south to soak some lands. But California was planning to use it for farmland later on during the summer. And in any case, it doesn't help LA because it doesn't reach LA. And even if it did, the water level wasn't the problem.
Wow.
It was pressure in the hydrants. But my point is this. There are three levels. There's the city, the state, and the federal government, right? So who should be in charge of the aquifers? Because it is a big sort of publicly shared resource, right? So who should be in charge of it?
Well, definitely not the feds if it's Northern California to Southern California.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the feds, I think. But I think maybe it should be the state because sort of all the cities and people in the state are sort of like coordinating together, and they need some sort of way to decide what to do with that water. That would be my thought. What do you guys think?
Do you mean more states than just California?
No. I'm saying if California is a state and they band together, they should probably have a way to decide collectively what to do with that water. But if there was no government, how would anyone decide? Yeah.
If there was no government, then it would just be whoever's property it was. Like, was this water collected in a certain area? Stuff like that.
You'd just be required to get water for your own needs, however you get it on the market.
Or cooperating.
But what about the big public projects?
Yeah.
Like big public projects, infrastructure. Like Rome made the aqueducts, right, and the public baths or whatever. Even back then, like right now, if there's huge, cubic meters of water, like huge amounts. Like, how would the private property system work to divide it up and stuff?
If you're saying just if this already existed and then we just went private one day, who would get it? I would think that anything the government owned would be auctioned off or something like that. In the case of if we just suddenly today, bam, government disappears and everything's going full private. That sounds like the best. That's just like one option.
That is a good question, though, because if it goes that way and then the decision is left up to Nestle, then human lives become real cheap and you have a problem on your hands. So it is a good question. I would think that there's a way to solve it voluntarily without overriding the consent of anybody. But it might take a little bit of, thinking about it.
Well, I don't think that it would mean that like all water possible would be up for auction and Nestle would be able to buy it. It would be like, this is one little area where there was a bunch of water saved up for some farmland and, it could even be split up. It would depend on who was in charge of letting go of it. Probably the people who worked the most closely with it would make the most sense. And if they abandoned it, that's a whole other problem.
Well, Nestle did buy a bunch of lakes in India and dumped stuff in it. And then they also in Michigan, Nestle was sold like millions of gallons.
Is that during a free market system? It's kind of like, I hate when people are like, hey, listen to this thing that a corporation working with the government did today. And you're acting like that's some kind of like, oh, bam, how are we going to have free markets now? That happened during government.
Well, the only way you get a situation where a quote unquote private corporation like Nestle is able to even have such an ambition as buying up all the fresh water in the world, you could never have that size of a monster exist without special government permissions in the first place.
That's true. I think that government and I'm against both governments and corporations, but given that they exist, right? I'll give one more example. So in Honduras, before any of the private cities, whatever, in the 1990s, you guys could look it up, there was privatization of water. And basically people protested a lot, but it was privatized, and I guess corporations were able to buy the water.
And probably prevent people from collecting rainwater and doing their own method, well digging and stuff like that.
And again, it's not in some kind of a free market vacuum. Like you just said, it was corporations bought the water. So, I mean, it's not really like the question you asked at the beginning. Like, if we went, bam, free markets overnight, like, I'm assuming in every single category of life, not just water. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
It's all pretty hopeful thinking, though. I'd have a really hard time imagining this modern world giving up ideas such as corporation.
Yeah, I think the thing is that even if we got rid of governments and corporations, I think that these small organizations would band together, and eventually we'd end up back at having large organizations. And even if we don't,
I don't think they could grow that large without, without the biggest gang of thugs in any geographic area supporting them.
Well, what if they do? I don't know. What if Bill Gates or BlackRock just attracts a lot of pension money, and then they go buy a lot of farmland or a lot of stuff?
Yep, that's an interesting question too. There was a time in American history where a good amount of Pennsylvania was actually without any functional government whatsoever, and they did have this problem where some highwaymen gangs sprung up and decided they were just gonna make their money by robbing people passing by, and they got handled, through voluntary means.
Doesn't sound like they took over the whole world either. And one thing is, like, you don't have to live in that part of Pennsylvania that goes bad.
Yeah.
It wasn't Pennsylvania, though, itself, like William Penn. They got the land because the guy wanted to build like a giant city, commonwealth, and they named it after him. Like, wasn't the whole thing even taken from the natives?
I don't know that part of the story. I'm sorry.
I don't either. I don't know enough about Pennsylvania history.
I bet
Pennsylvania.
Ricky knows.
Mark Edge actually told me a cool story about this, that the natives told Penn that you could have as much land as a horse can go around in 1 day or something. So they made this relay thing where the horses would just go full speed and shift over the baton to each other, and they just got this giant swath of land that became Pennsylvania.
Huh.
Interesting. I just know he was a Quaker because of Quaker Oats. I actually went to Pennsylvania twice this year, or like last year, 2024, and that's the most time I've ever spent in Pennsylvania ever.
Really?
Went to Valley Forge. Oh. Yeah. And one of the times was just passing through. So, yeah, before that, it's like, I kind of didn't have many thoughts about it, at all from day to day. And I've definitely never really been interested in the history, but I feel like almost all of the land was basically stolen from somebody. But at the same time, a lot of the time you go to find out that this tribe people say that land was stolen from didn't even believe in property rights.
That's right. They didn't really. They were nomadic people. They just believed that the land belonged to itself. You can't own you can't own a piece of the earth. It was a ridiculous notion in their mind.
One group that I know was beginning to make things that were resembling property rights, at least, were the people who built the longhouses. Oh, I'm forgetting what they're called. It was like 5 Nations, and it was in New York. I really think that they were on to like creating a really good society, because they were creating kind of like organizations between tribes that were warring. They stopped warring because they would meet at a longhouse, like just a longhouse, and they'd have a representative from each of them and talk things over instead of warring. And they were like the closest that I've ever learned of to kind of understanding property rights.
I've heard some people's accounts of early Native American history that make claims that they were far more advanced than the current history books will tell you, and that I've even heard claims go so far as to say that a lot of the really big Gothic-looking stone buildings were already here, and that the world fairs were set up in order to kind of cover that up and make it look like Europeans had built those things when they were already here when Europeans showed up.
Tons of the buildings, stories make no sense when you start to look into them. Like, there are all kinds of ornate, crazy buildings that when you go try to find, why and when and how was this built, it's like, well, these 10 really poor people put it up in a year. Makes no sense 99% of the time. And a lot of them, weirdly enough, are asylums. Like, a bunch of asylums popped up in the 1800s. People who like shouldn't have this much time, and there's no reason to make an asylum insanely beautiful and ornate, like you're just trying to drop people off somewhere.
I think that would qualify as one of these things that would point at to say that these buildings were already here and not even built by white people at all, unless it was like some ancient white people. But the claims are that these buildings are older than the 1600s.
Yeah. I've heard similar stuff. And the thing is, I don't have like a belief about it either way.
I don't either. I just think it's an interesting claim.
Yep.
Something to put in the file folder.
It is. And, I don't know much about ancient civilizations either, but I know religions are going to make their claims and stick their territory and what really happened in the Americas. But what I will say is that, history is a strange thing in that whoever's telling it is going to tell their version of the history and make them out to be the heroes. Look at American history. People say that George Washington was an absolute hero. Some people paint him as a villain. It doesn't matter. What matters is that stories are being told through history, and they shape our past and they shape our future.
I was wondering because Greg was saying, what about large-scale water things like aqueducts? And I know that in Morelia, Mexico, there's a large aqueduct. And I used to think it was like ancient, but apparently it was built in 1785. It was built by the church.
Oh, interesting.
So that, I don't know, wasn't built by the government. I guess they were closer together back then, the church and the governments, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were a lot of towns in the westward expansion that just had a Lions Club that, if you were part of it, then you pitched in and they built a school and a hospital for the town and whatever it needed.
Yeah, and I think that's a much nicer system than what we have now. Captain liked to talk about the Tuaths in, I think it was Ireland, where people would just it's kind of like just having a church, and then you guys can make decisions together to like, hey, we want to save up money for some kind of a building, so we'll voluntarily do it together, and it was all voluntary. Mm-hmm. That was like a big part of the Tuath was being voluntary.
Yeah, and if you're not being stolen from, I think a lot of people would be surprised to see how much a small group of people can get done together.
I think it matters so much less to call us and ask us, hey, how do you think this would go down? And hey, here's why I think it wouldn't happen that way. It's so much less important than, is there a way for this to be non-violent and coercive and like this life we live? Of course there is. Yeah. People need to have way more imagination in that regard. There has to be a way for things to be less violent than they are today.
So I think a lot of people like to call into the show and ask these kinds of questions to get us to think and get the listeners to think. Maybe they don't have a solution themselves and are curious what we think about it. But the reality is we can only theorize right now because we haven't really tried it yet to see how our water rights going to be solved, how our power rights going to be solved, how we're going to do X, Y, or Z. But the fact is, let's use our imagination. Let's use our abilities to think outside the box and come up with solutions that are voluntary and not coercive.
That's right. I think, if you even have one other friend that you can sit down with for an hour or two and just discuss it, I bet you can come up with at least 3 or 4 good ideas. And then you can start running those ideas past other people and see what they think.
I'd love for us to just have a few years of not being propagandized into behaving certain ways in general, for people to be able to think outside the box about things and stop doing horrible things to one another, because right now it's like people think that human nature is just to be evil, and how can you say that when people are being completely brainwashed from the time that they are literally born at this point? I don't think we know anything about what human nature is like in the United States.
I don't think so either, because it's never really been tested, because we have had this propaganda experience from, you and I Stu are, I guess, about the same age. Bonnie's younger than us, but, from our lives beginning on this earth, we've been told this propaganda about America, about the world we live in, and, a spiritual idea that, we're supposed to believe in because it's the one true way. And so we've been propagandized since birth. Like Bonnie, you were saying that we've been propagandized since birth, and so we don't know what our nature is going to be like without propaganda.
Well, I think that might be one of the most distinguishable characteristics of what a human is that they're highly programmable. And they'll just repeat the programming that they're fed, and that's why especially in the things that happen in the first 3 years of a human's life really shape the way their life experience is going to play out.
That's a really good point. That I don't know anybody who's just like 0% programmable. One person that just shocks me with how young they were when they started questioning things is Chris Wade. Sorry, Mr. Penguin. He's always like, yeah, when I was in 4th grade and they made us do this, I was like, this makes no sense. Why are we doing this? And I'm just like, that was not me. When I was a kid, I was just like, yeah, listen.
Yeah, I'm going to go along with your rules because, whatever. That's what I was told to believe.
I genuinely believed it was right to follow rules. And I remember being it.
I was somewhere between that and Penguin in that I saw the way around and I was quick to go for it. And then but I always felt like I was doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And so I didn't figure out until later that I was just being abused, and it was all, it's mental programming, and not for the better. It doesn't leave you in a good spot to make critical thinking choices and to have the confidence and skill set to navigate this life. They have you in such a state of learned helplessness that you're basically dependent, and you're stuck in childhood for the rest of your life.
And it's so awful because we're fighting on so many fronts when it comes to learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Not only is it about literally feeling like, oh, well, I need to depend on others to do everything in my life for me, but also we're being attacked physically. When I was born, I learned this earlier this week, and I was genuinely crying earlier this week because it's like, I try so hard to be healthy, and some weird health problem popped up that I think I'm actually getting over. And I was like researching as much as I never stop learning about health and things like that. Like, that's honestly my number one thing I learn about during the week when I'm like not on the show. But I got interested in specifically like glyphosate because I was noticing that anything solid I was eating was bad or hurting me. And, that's like a lot of flour, and that's never been a thing for me before. So I was like, what if I'm just like getting my fill of glyphosate? And I was crying because I was born the year that the vaccine schedule got like 10x'd, and the year that glyphosate got allowed to be used for like 10 extra things it wasn't being used for before. Wow. It's just like, I feel like I've just like never had a freaking chance. I didn't want to eat meat when I was a kid just because I like didn't like the idea. It sounded gross because I wasn't like raised in a natural way, like being able to see animals and see the life cycle. Mm-hmm. And then I was put on this seed oil stuff that they feed children who won't grow, and I was being given iron, like liquid iron medicine. It's probably all stored in my body, and I became like the runt of my family. Like, I'm pretty short, and they're all pretty short, but I'm like the shortest. But what did I say all that for? Yeah, we're fighting on more than one front. It's like, if you feel sick all the time and you feel like, oh, I need this and that to feel better, I need to like go to the doctors and do exactly what they tell me and not question anything, that's also learned helplessness.
Yeah.
And we're just being attacked on so many fronts, and one of the best things to fight against it is just knowledge itself.
Right. And well, add a disability to the mix, and then it becomes more of this learned helplessness in a way, because, well, you have this disability that you're working with, and it's nice to have people around that you trust to help you if you have a problem. So, adding a disability to this learned helplessness does make it a little hard to fight the battle.
Wow. It's really impressive for somebody like that to not just be, oh, I just get everything I need from the government.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah, I feel like we were saying all that because we started talking about human nature, and public school absolutely nurtures this feeling like you need to be dependent on others, and feeling like the thing about like that they came up with the term learned helplessness to describe activity of rats in studies where the rats, if they know that there's any ability for them to get better, or whatever the situation is, like being locked in something or not being fed the right food, if they get like able to see the light at the end of the tunnel, like, hey, look, every once in a while we'll open this door and you can see that there's like way more field to run in over here. For example, if their problem is to be stuck in a cage, even though they weren't released, they do better than the rats who never got shown the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
So let's say the experiment is rats that were like purposely like kept in a small cage, then the ones who never even got shown that there was anything outside of there, they die faster and there are more, problems with their body.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Hope is a powerful drug.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Somebody mentioned the other day, or not the other day, today, I saw that Ross Ulbricht, I think it was today, posted 2 new pictures of himself outside of prison.
Nice.
And somebody commented, like, dude was in prison for 10 years and comes out looking even better.
Yeah. I thought he looked great too. I only saw the one picture of when they let him go, but it looked like he was in great health, so.
Yeah, that's so true. He doesn't look unhealthy and he doesn't look all beaten down, really. He has kind of like more wrinkles around his eyes, but he's 11 or 13 years older.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I wonder if Ian and Ross are cut from the same cloth, because it seems like Ian's doing well in prison and Ross got out of prison doing well too.
Yeah, I feel like both of them are able to keep a really positive attitude.
I know Ross did some very hard time. I know that he was not able to keep a positive outlook the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And he had some struggles.
One thing I did whenever he got released was I went to Twitter, and you can like type in somebody's username, comma, and then something you want to search on their page. So I searched Ross Ulbricht, comma, hope, and I found so many good tweets of his with the word hope in them. And I brought that up because we were talking about you said hope is a powerful drug.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, we have an update about Ian's case that we're going to get into in the next segment. Basically just what happened at the hearing, the oral arguments in Ian Freeman's case versus the United States. And people want to know what exactly does it all mean. So we'll answer that in the next segment. It's Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160. More coming up. Don't go anywhere. It's Free Talk Live.
In addition to creating a Twitter account, Pope Benedict XVI plans to further connect with Christian youth by giving up on Catholicism. Quote, in order to really relate to modern teens, he needs to make religion a much smaller part of his busy life, just like they do. And it's already working. Tweets like, can someone go to church for me, LOL, hashtag sleeping in, have been retweeted over 1 million times by lazy Catholic teens, while tweets like, if God was real, how come there's so much murder, and I'm still Catholic, I just don't go to church or believe in Jesus, have been especially successful with college students who are questioning the church's teaching.
It's really cool to see that the Pope is as active on social media and as skeptical about God as I am. Look, he just tweeted, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. That's totally how I feel.
Pope Benedict's aides say his next project involves reaching out to Muslims by sitting down with Islamic leaders and proclaiming his undying allegiance to Allah.
This is the Onion News Network.
Should you be able to earn an honest living free from senseless government interference? The Institute for Justice thinks so. That's why we've spent years defending hard-working men and women from pointless government regulations. Nationwide, IJ has created opportunity by reducing government power, but there is still more work to be done. Visit our website today at ij.org. Let IJ take care of the government so you can take care of your business.
What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live listen line, 641-793-0191.
The latest episode of Free Talk Live continues with Hour 2 up next after the news here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Hire. China is accusing Donald Trump of weaponizing trade after he announced he's imposing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium entering the United States. The US president also says he's planning reciprocal tariffs on any country currently taxing American products. From Washington, Nick Harper reports.
There are fears now of a spiralling trade war, with Donald Trump telling reporters on Sunday on board Air Force One that on Monday he'll be announcing a new tariff, 25% on any steel and aluminium entering the United States. And he promised an announcement on reciprocal tariffs on Tuesday or Wednesday, saying it would apply to every country, adding very simply, if they charge us, we charge them.
China, though, has already imposed retaliatory tariffs on the US, hitting about $14 billion worth of goods. Beijing laid out those tariffs last week in response to the White House's decision to impose an additional 10% levy on Chinese products. Our Asia correspondent Laura Westbrook has the details.
China's measures target US exports of liquefied natural gas, coal, crude oil and farm equipment, as well as some automotive goods, with levies of 10 to 15%. Delaying the start of the tariffs and the targeted approach by Beijing had been seen as creating space for negotiations to try to avert a wider trade conflict. But when the deadline passed on Sunday, there was no news of a deal, and Beijing announced the tariffs were in effect.
Hamas says it's delaying the release of Israeli hostages until further notice, accusing Israel of breaching the Gaza ceasefire agreement. The terror group claims Israel violated the deal by delaying the return of displaced persons to northern Gaza, targeting them with shelling and failing to allow the entry of humanitarian aid. Israel calls the decision itself a complete violation of the ceasefire, which began last month. 17 Israeli hostages, some dead, were still due to be released in the first phase of the ceasefire, the next swap due on Saturday. President Trump has condemned Hamas over the state of 3 Israeli hostages released last weekend, saying they were in a horrible condition. Charles Gibson is in Tel Aviv.
As well as comparing the 3 Israeli men released by Hamas to Holocaust victims, President Trump said that at some point we're going to lose our patience. All 3 were visibly gaunt as TV cameras filmed them being transferred to the Red Cross inside Gaza on Saturday. However, the Israeli government is also facing criticism over the condition of some of the Palestinian prisoners released the same day. The Palestinian Red Crescent says that 7 out of the 183 were admitted to hospital after being handed over by Israeli authorities.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, a view from overseas of the gutting by President Donald Trump and Elon Musk of the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. The provider of more than 40% of the total global budget for humanitarian assistance and development aid, it is mothballed, though a federal judge on Friday issued a temporary restraining order that prevents the White House from laying off its 10,000 members of staff. President Trump claims, without providing evidence, that fraud was committed at USAID. Mr. Musk argues it was wasting taxpayer money on woke causes. Michael Keating is a professor of international economy at Richmond American University, London, and says the agency's shutdown is impacting American companies and employees disproportionately.
USAID is dispersed by private sector companies employing a lot of Americans. These private companies are laying workers off now. And you're hearing that they don't really want to pick fights over these what are potentially breaches of contract, because they also get other sorts of government contracts and they don't want to be on the radar of the Trump administration. So they're just firing American workers, basically.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is now tasked with evaluating USAID's programs to determine whether they align with President Trump's national security priorities. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
A reminder of our top stories again. China is accusing US President Donald Trump of weaponizing trade after he announced he's imposing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium entering the United States. China's already imposed retaliatory tariffs on the US, hitting about $14 billion worth of goods. And Hamas says it's delaying the release of Israeli hostages until further notice, accusing Israel of breaching the Gaza ceasefire agreement. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Benji Haya in Washington.
After briefly reviewing several documents outlining his parents' dire financial circumstances today, 23-year-old Wesleyan University graduate Zach Wallace told reporters he had, quote, absolutely no clue how his mother and father are going to dig themselves out of the $35,000 of student loan debt they incurred to pay for his college education.
I mean, this is going to be really hard on my parents. When I was in college, I just assumed that, they would pay off my student loans within a few years of me graduating. But I never realized how expensive college is going to be for them.
Wallace, who graduated with a film studies degree in 2012 and has since had 2 unpaid internships, told reporters that from the way prevailing interest rates are trending, his parents could easily be paying off his debt for the next quarter century.
They're going to be paying for the rest of their lives. And on top of it all, they have to help me out with my rent, too. I mean, it sucks. It really, really sucks.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control. That means you can call 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. And Free Talk Live is brought to you by LibertyMinded.com. Official Free Talk Live gear, like t-shirts and hoodies, are available at LibertyMinded.com. Plus, you'll find a unique collection of cool and funny liberty-oriented clothing at LibertyMinded.com. That's LibertyMinded.com. And with you on Free Talk Live tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
Riley.
And Stu.
And we have a caller on the line, so I'm just going to go ahead and answer their call before we get into any of the topics we are going to discuss here tonight. Unscreened caller, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
You know who else didn't give due process?
Your mom?
To his victims. When he tried to hire a hitman.
That's so dumb.
Really
wow, what a dumb comparison.
Did he give his victims a chance to testify?
I don't think you know what due process means. It means you're going to do something to bring charges against somebody and doing it in the accepted ways to do it, not like murdering. Like, oh wait, you have to give due process before you murder. And plus, there are no victims because that didn't happen, and there's never been any proof that happened. So, good night, Skeeter. And he's not talking about Ian for any listeners. He's talking about Ross Ulbricht. There's unsubstantiated claims made by the government to poison Ross's case that they did not bring charges up against him for. They totally would have because they wanted to throw the book against him if they actually thought they could win. So have a good night, Skeeter.
Yep, that guy just wants to call and spread lies about people.
And plus, it doesn't really matter because, Ross Ulbricht is pardoned, so why bring it up time and time again?
No, I think he's just jealous of people who actually do things in the world.
Probably. Well, it just sounds like something Skeeter would be jealous of.
So, in the last segment, we told the listeners we were going to give an update about Ian's case. And so, Ian Freeman, my husband, founder of this show, he had a hearing in his case on the 5th. It was Wednesday. And I attended it, and there were probably about 25 people there supporting.
I wasn't able to go, but there was a live stream of the proceedings on YouTube.
Yep.
So I was able to get audio from that, and I'll be talking about it on my podcast going out shortly.
Oh, nice. So we made a big enough of a showing that Jacob Hornberger from the Future of Freedom Foundation said that he thought it was enough people to make kind of a statement to the judge. So really good to know. It was a much smaller seating area than the courtroom in Concord, if anyone listening knows what I'm talking about. So it was like 25 people really was all that there was even room for, and one person was standing.
Wow.
So
small courtroom.
Well, in on top of the fact that there was all these like people there in these reserved spots, and Jacob Hornberger was saying he thinks that they were like either new lawyers because they all looked young, or students there to observe the whole thing. So Ian's case was first, and the thing is, when you're appealing things that you've been convicted on, you get a 3-panel. Maybe it's not always the same in every single district, but at least here in Boston,
It sounded like there was just a panel of judges hearing arguments to me.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I was saying you get a panel of 3 judges, and so Ian's lawyers were on one side of the room, and the prosecution was on the other side of the room. Ian wasn't there, so that's one thing a lot of people are asking me. I thought he was going to be there up until like maybe a month ago. I was like, oh, I guess it totally makes sense. Like, why would they drag you out of court, bring you to Boston just to have you be there? But it's going to be his lawyers making I guess it like kind of does seem like, well, shouldn't you be allowed to say something for yourself? But no, I guess only your lawyers.
So
what do you do if you defend yourself?
The reason they don't bring you out to go to an appeals court is that, as opposed to they do for a trial, is you have a right to face your accuser, whereas he's already been convicted. I think that's the line of reasoning they use.
If he was defending himself, do you think they probably would have like brought him in? Because like, if you don't have a lawyer, who would defend you in court at that point, or for your appeal, not defend you?
If you were speaking for yourself, I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, that just popped in my head for the first time, so I don't know either. Well, luckily he's not defending himself in this matter. It's pretty complicated. So what happened was the Ian side got to just go up, and I don't remember if they just instantly started talking or the judges just instantly started, okay, here are some questions we have. And
from what I remember, they instantly started talking, and then the judges, while the lawyers were talking, were asking and bringing questions.
And each side only had 15 minutes, but one thing people definitely should know, because they were just so shocked by that, and I was too, it really is shocking. It still seems like it should be longer, but the judges have had the appeal for months, and they've all looked over the whole entire thing, and they're expected to read the transcript of the case as well. So that's a really good thing, because when Jacob Hornberger from the Future Freedom Foundation looked at the transcript after he had accidentally, I guess you'd say, decided that Ian was a con artist because he heard that from the government, well, he read the transcript and he just said, wow, oh my God, oh no, this is an innocent man. Only from nothing but reading the transcript. When I first read Jacob's articles on his website, I was like, whoa, did he talk to Mark? Did he talk to somebody who sat down and explained everything to him in the way that we see it? No, he just read the transcript. It's like he was just there in the courtroom, but he wasn't. Even less like that, because, it's more easy to soak everything in when you're there, but he just read the transcript and he paid for himself, and he realized that Ian was an innocent man and wrote a 3-part article about it, which you can find at freeiannow.org. It's just on the front page. Nice. Probably the easiest way to go find that article or those articles. And
Ian's case was absolutely ridiculous. It wasn't something like prosecution said, well, Ian did this, and then they, defense is like, are you sure? And they're like, well, maybe he didn't really. And then it went like that over pretty much every single argument. And then when they got to the end, they're like, see, we said he did all this stuff, so that means guilty, right?
Yeah. So, one of the things that the judges I remember asking about was kind of exciting to me, because in the court case, in the trial, the prosecution put up a witness who was a woman who worked for the IRS, and she filled out this paperwork and said, according to my estimates on how much Ian Freeman would have owed, he would have owed like blah, 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 whatever, let's say $1 million in taxes. And Ian's lawyer, Mark Sisti, got to go up there and said, isn't it just as possible that he didn't owe anything if you had looked at it with all the information, since you're admitting that you didn't actually get to sit down and look at deductions and stuff like that? And she said, yeah, I guess it's just as possible that he didn't owe anything. And Mark Sisti just like sized papers down and walked away. It was like literally a mic drop.
Yeah.
Because that's how evidence works. You have to actually have evidence of the thing you're talking about, and not just making something up and realizing that it could actually also be the opposite of what you're saying. That's insane. When that happened, I was pretty positive that Ian wasn't going to go to jail, or at least he wasn't going to get convicted on every single count. At that point, I was like, wow, that was great. That's just how you know that this jury, for whatever reason, like didn't like Ian, had something against him, wanted to harm him. Because when I think that they should be in trouble for saying guilty after that, honestly. Like,
well, this is the way that people who have been through public schooling kind of think, and they're chomping at the bit to say the word guilty when they get called up for jury duty.
Oh, yeah.
First thing they're thinking is when they open that letter is like, oh yeah, I gotta say guilty.
wow, it's so awful.
I don't know if that's entirely true, though. Maybe for some people, but
I think it's true of most people.
I think more people than not.
Okay.
There was one woman who ended up on the jury who answered a question from Ian's lawyer, and you only get to throw out so many people. So for whatever reason, Ian said he wanted to throw her out, but his lawyer said that it was maybe better to throw someone else out, whatever. So this woman was asked, if you saw that somebody was facing many charges instead of a few charges, would you be more likely to believe that they were guilty because there were more charges? And she said yes.
Right, when that has nothing to do with whether a person's guilty.
It's insane.
In fact, a person facing more charges might be less likely guilty.
It just has no weight. It should have no weight on what you think. Like, I can accuse you of 2 things or 1,000,000 things, and I could also be lying about every single one. Like, I could, not be telling the truth when I accused you of those things. It should have no weighing. And it's definitely a way that tons of people think. Like, just that if you get accused of something, why would somebody waste their time to accuse you of? You don't know. They could have plenty of motives for accusing someone of something, and if they want to make it more believable, they could totally say, oh yeah, and he did this and this and this too. Just absolutely like illogical thinking. That's definitely the result of public school. Like, you're not going to go to school and learn how to think logically, or
No, they have a process for that, and it's very easy to learn, but they won't even breathe a word of it in public school.
They
don't want to tell you about jury nullification either.
Yeah, it's called the trivium method. It works basically just like what your computer does with input, processing, output. So, but the old words for it are grammar, logic, and rhetoric.
Contemplation, or the computing part. Wait, was that the word you said? Computing? Wait, what was the middle one?
Input, processing, output.
Processing. So contemplation, which is basically the processing part, is something that no one gets told to do. It's oddly enough a thing in Catholicism, where they tell you like, oh, if you're trying to make a decision, have a contemplation period, but it has a more fancy name.
Yeah.
And I think that not enough people get taught to do that.
Well, the key to doing that part right is to look for things that contradict, and then you can obviously tell that those two things are not mutually true. So one's got to be true, or they could both be false, but they can't both be true. And so you can go from there and you find out more about it, and the things that you're able to back up with, scientific method, or looking for source materials, or what have you. That's how you do. That's how you do that middle step. You look for what contradicts, and you remove the parts that don't add up.
I also think that like gut feelings have a lot to do with it, because if you just think, oh, like the example of the jury, I just got jury duty in the mail, and my first thing I want to do, my first decision I want to make just right off the bat is to say guilty, instead of giving yourself time to process and think about what you want to do, and then actually, there's also the part of actually going to the trial before deciding that. Let your gut feelings lead you way more than just what you think you should do.
Yeah.
Because you could think that, this thing that I've always thought I would do is the right thing to do. And then when you're actually in the situation, your gut might tell you something is not right and you shouldn't do that thing just because you've been always told to do it by the government or whatever.
Well, we've all been, like we've talked about earlier on the show, we've been propagandized, and we've essentially lost track of how to think for ourselves and how to pay attention to our gut, our inner knowing, if you will. And that's been done by spiritual authorities, government authorities. And so to get back to get back to listening to our gut or our intuition is something we should all strive for.
Another way this has been talked about is a dual thinking system in our brains, where we have one system that thinks fast and one system that thinks slow. And your slow system is for contemplating systems and long form things, whereas your quick thinking system is for, avoiding the target or making a split second decision.
That makes a lot of sense. Like when you're driving, you might get taken over by something and just be able to do a thing without even thinking about it. So of course it's necessary, but you don't want to just live your whole life making everything every decision in a split second.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of interesting you say it like that, because just the other day I was listening to Andrew Huberman, which isn't like my favorite person to listen to or something, but somebody sent me an article a video where he explained like the gut-brain connection, and he explained a whole bunch of stuff about just like how the gut works that I didn't know. And one thing he was talking about is he said that there are tons of situations in the body, not just the gut, where there's a slow and a fast way of doing the same thing and both work at the same time. And I was like, that's really interesting. And that totally checks out with what you're saying. Mm-hmm. In the situation where what he was saying, he was talking about like enzymes being created, and he was talking about how they're created on the spot, but also how your brain will it's a slower situation where your brain's like the pituitary starts sending out these hormones that go and do this and then that and then turn into this, and it's a chain thing. But both those are happening at once, so you have like a backup. But yeah, anyways, it's weird when you like learn something about something and then it applies somewhere else. Interesting.
Yep. So
I just kind of said it. But we were updating the listeners about Ian, and basically what does all it mean? When's each side went up and got asked questions. Yeah, so by the way, I guess I didn't actually finish that thought that I was saying earlier. The judge asked the prosecution, hey, so in the transcript, which definitely is good because now we know that they did read the transcript. Mm-hmm. In the transcript, it says that your witness for the IRS said that it's very possible Ian didn't know any taxes. So what's up with that? So like there were questions like that. Like they weren't just being like mean to Ian's lawyers and nice to the government lawyers. Thank God. Well, all it means is now we wait for these people to make decisions on whether or not they'll drop Ian's charges or not. And Ian's appealing all of them except for one, which I didn't know this until the Monday before the trial. So the most recent Monday is when I learned this. That Ian is not appealing the conspiracy charge. Oh, sorry, there's two conspiracies. So he's not appealing the conspiracy to launder money charge. Okay. And I don't understand the decision at all. So, ask Ian if you want. Sorry. I don't know why I said sorry. It just sounded rude the way I said it. So when anybody who's wondering.
When the judge's decision comes down, is it possible they grant him an appeal on some of the charges and not some of the others?
Mm-hmm. It's possible that, there were 7 charges, 1 got dropped, so he has 6. I think that's the case. Unless there was 8, 1 got dropped, and now he has 7. But 4 tax ones, a conspiracy to launder money, the money laundering one got dropped, and then there is the running an unlicensed money transmission business and conspiracy to run a unlicensed money transmitting business. So that is 7. And he's appealing 6. And the thing is, the judges could say, we're going to drop 1 and leave the other 5, or we're going to drop 2 and leave the other 5. Oh, wait, dang it. Both of those don't add up to 7. not a good time to try to do math while doing the radio show. But
yeah, they may decide to drop some and not others though.
And there's different ways it could pan out where they decide to drop some, and yet it doesn't affect Ian's sentencing. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because basically, let's say they just drop like just the tax evasion ones. Well, the one that took the most time, gave him the most time in prison was the money transmitting ones, and the tax ones are just being run concurrent, and they're shorter sentences anyway. So I don't really think that would it would then get sent back to the same judge who sentenced him, and would that really weigh on him enough to where he'd want to change the sentence? It's possible not, but we also don't know that.
Well, if this panel of judges wanted to allow Ian the maximum amount of leniency, what would that look like? Do we know?
So there's two things. They would either say that they're going to send everything back to the judge for resentencing, or they will decide they're going to send everything to a new trial.
Oh, that can be interesting.
Okay.
I don't even know if these judges are allowed to just drop it. Honestly, I'm not sure. I can't remember now. But if you go to the Future of Freedom Foundation and read what Jacob Hornberger put there, he made a video with his, as a longtime lawyer, professional opinion, but he doesn't have an opinion on what they're going to do. He was just saying, if this, then that, if they decide this, then that. He said it'll probably take them, what his guess is, like 2 months to make a decision at all.
You said I could find that at Future of Freedom Foundation?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's Future of Freedom Foundation. Keep wanting to add an S in there. And at the end, one of the judges said, well, we're going to move on to the next case, but can we have everybody that's not staying for these other cases and it was only here for Ian to leave? And so we all got to stand up and leave together. So I really liked that, because to me, it seemed like maybe he wanted to see who all was there for Ian, and that was really nice.
Yeah, it sounds nice that Ian got a lot of support, because, when it comes to these sorts of cases, I'm sure not a lot of people want to support a criminal or someone who appears to be a criminal. So it's nice to see that, 24 people went down to Boston to support Ian in his case, because it shows a level of, hey, this man may not be as guilty as we think he may be.
Right. Like, they probably get tons of cases that they hear where there's no one there supporting the guy. He's just in his prison cell writing up appeals, with his lawyer. And I'm not saying that makes them less innocent than Ian. I'm just saying that it probably says something to him that this is different. That people are out there saying, like, we don't like that this happened. So it was really nice that there was so much support. And Jacob Hornberger is just one of the best people I've ever met. He's like, oh, I wish he was my grandpa. He's awesome.
I really like Jacob Hornberger too. There was some talk of trying to get the national LP to run him as the presidential candidate.
Well, totally vote
back.
for him.
I would vote for him too. That'd be really cool.
I'd be tempted to break my spotless record of non-voting for a guy like that, because he is pretty good.
He's awesome.
He's very level-headed too, but his principles are good.
Yeah, he's level-headed in the way that he never says, like, oh, all juries suck, like me.
Right.
He is just like, well, we don't know what's going on in their heads. Like, he's very, like, giving people the benefit of the doubt kind of thing.
Yeah, he's calm and polite.
But even he, who always gives people the benefit of the doubt, said he looked at Ian's case and said he was being attacked and he's an innocent man, and it just seems like these prosecutors went after him with everything they could when really they had basically nothing, and it was shocking to him that Ian was found guilty.
Yeah, the only logical thing that I can think of is that somebody had something personal against Ian, somebody with political power, because they sicked the FBI on him, say go investigate this guy and get him on something. I don't care what it is. They've been quoted as saying they could indict a ham sandwich.
Yep.
So it doesn't. If they want you, they're going to get you.
Yeah,
I think it's that kind of a thing.
There's lots of talk right now during the all the stuff that's coming out about USAID, believe it or not, where people are saying, well, there's lots of evidence of the government saying find the man, then we'll find the crime, as opposed to find the crime and find the man, if that makes sense. That's like the saying that it's being said. Like, oh, we are going to find somebody and then pin something on him. It's
Right.
Free Talk Live. More coming up.
A congressman recently revealed that legislation totaling 2,900 pages and involving more than $1 trillion was available to members of Congress for less than 48 hours to study and consider. That's over 60 pages of legislation per hour. Do you think anyone read the entire bill? I'm Jim Babka with DownsizeDC.org. Consider a proposal buried in a 3,200-page, $388 billion bill, which would have empowered committee chairmen or their agents to examine Americans' tax returns. When this horrible provision came to light, no one claimed to know how it got into the bill. One congressman questioned said, "I didn't write it, I didn't approve it, I wasn't even consulted." If your attorney represented you this way, he might be disbarred. But this is how Congress represents you every day. That's why DownsizeDC.org has created the Read the Bills Act. You can force Congress to read their bills before they pass them at DownsizeDC.org.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Haya. China is accusing Donald Trump of weaponizing trade after he announced he's imposing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium entering the United States. The US president also says he's planning reciprocal tariffs on any country currently taxing American products. From Washington, Nick Harper reports.
There are fears now of a spiralling trade war, with Donald Trump telling reporters on Sunday on board Air Force One that on Monday he'll be announcing a new tariff, 25% on any steel and aluminium entering the United States. And he promised an announcement on reciprocal tariffs on Tuesday or Wednesday, saying it would apply to every country, adding very simply, if they charge us, we charge them.
China, though, has already imposed retaliatory tariffs on the US, hitting about $14 billion worth of goods. Beijing laid out those tariffs last week in response to the White House's decision to impose an additional 10% levy on Chinese products. Our Asia correspondent Laura Westbrook has the details.
China's measures target US exports of liquefied natural gas, coal, crude oil and farm equipment, as well as some automotive goods, with levies of 10 to 15%. Delaying the start of the tariffs and the targeted approach by Beijing had been seen as creating space for negotiations to try to avert a wider trade conflict. But when the deadline passed on Sunday, there was no news of a deal, and Beijing announced the tariffs were in effect.
Hamas says it's delaying the release of Israeli hostages until further notice, accusing Israel of breaching the Gaza ceasefire agreement. The terror group claims Israel violated the deal by delaying the return of displaced persons to northern Gaza, targeting them with shelling and failing to allow the entry of humanitarian aid. Israel calls the decision itself a complete violation of the ceasefire, which began last month. 17 Israeli hostages, some dead, were still due to be released in the first phase of the ceasefire, the next swap due on Saturday. President Trump has condemned Hamas over the state of 3 Israeli hostages released last weekend, saying they were in a horrible condition. Charles Gibson is in Tel Aviv.
As well as comparing the 3 Israeli men released by Hamas to Holocaust victims, President Trump said that at some point we're going to lose our patience. All 3 were visibly gaunt as TV cameras filmed them being transferred to the Red Cross inside Gaza on Saturday. However, the Israeli government is also facing criticism over the condition of some of the Palestinian prisoners released the same day. The Palestinian Red Crescent says that 7 out of the 183 were admitted to hospital after being handed over by Israeli authorities.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number here. That's 603-283-6160. And we've been podcasting since podcast began, but we're launching a new podcast anyway. Our new podcast is a 30 to 45 minute show releasing once a week, and you can find it at freetalkcast.com. It's brought to you by the same people who bring you Free Talk Live, and we'd love for you to check it out. The existing radio archive isn't going anywhere. This is just a new show designed from the start to be a podcast, so check it out at freetalkcast.com. And with you on Free Talk Live tonight, you've got me, Bonnie.
Riley.
And Stu.
Oh, and while we're doing announcements, next week we're having a new person on the show, but a guest, but in studio. So he was willing to come and talk about whatever we're going to talk about for the rest of the show. So on this coming Saturday, the 15th, we're having Ben the Emo ANCAP, who is kind of popular on the internet for being the Emo ANCAP. And he is currently the candidate for chair for LPNH, since the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire needs a new chair, and they have a convention coming up for that. He's candidate for chair and the Emo ANCAP, and I'd like to talk to him about when he was a candidate for sheriff. That's how I used to know him, and how he did kind of similar to Arya kind of sheriff run.
Nice.
Less in your face, I guess. But it's Free Talk Live, and you can talk about whatever's on your mind. And tonight, the first thing we were about to get into, but we hadn't actually started yet, I want to know more of the facts about this, because, we have what Dana said was the truth, but the United States is beginning to fly migrants or immigrants. I don't know why. I just think I prefer the word immigrant. Why make a distinction? You're a migrant or an immigrant?
I don't know why the distinction either, but maybe it's words have different meanings in different contexts. I don't know.
It almost sounds like immigrants is coming in and migrants is leaving, but I don't know that for sure. That would just be a guess.
Yeah.
So it says the first flight carrying detained migrants from the U.S. to Guantanamo Bay landed at the American naval base in Cuba as the Trump administration undertakes the initial phases of expanding a small migrant detention center there. A flight Tuesday from Fort Bliss in Texas to Guantanamo. Dang, I said it right this whole entire show until just now. Which left in the afternoon had roughly a dozen migrants on board, people familiar with the matter said. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed the developments Tuesday on Fox Business. Quote, the first flights from the United States to Guantanamo Bay with illegal migrants are underway, she said, listing recent immigration-related actions that President Trump has taken. And she said he's not messing around. The U.S. base at Guantanamo has always had a facility to detain some migrants, typically those caught heading for the U.S. at sea. The administration has said it would expand our operations there to hold up to 30,000. The base is now and only they said only a dozen, it said. The base is now equipped to hold 120 migrants. So, there's a bit of a clickbaity title, right? It says, U.S. begins migrant flights to Guantanamo Bay. The Trump administration has said it would expand the operations at the American naval base in Cuba to hold up to 30,000 immigrants. Okay, it wasn't clickbaity. I just didn't fully capture all that right now it only can hold 120. They only sent a dozen there so far. It already existed, and they're expanding soon, I guess, to make it be able to hold 30,000. It says Trump last week ordered the Pentagon and Homeland Security Department to construct a facility to contain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people, he said, at the White House. He made the remarks while signing a bill passed in response to a murder by a migrant who was in the U.S. illegally. The Homeland Security Department didn't respond. Okay, whatever. Yeah, so it sounds like Dana already told us that they're going after these immigrants who have a record, whether it's
criminal background in their home country.
Yep. And so apparently that guy that killed a woman when she was taking a run I think it was at a Georgia college. I think that's the one that he's talking about. There was one that he named it after her, the girl that was killed. It says the base is better known for its notorious prison where the U.S. has kept suspected terror suspects for more than 2 decades. Oh, so, okay. Guantanamo Bay is a base. And I already knew that, but I'm always just thinking of it being mostly just like this giant prison. But now I'm thinking of
it's
it.
a military base, yeah.
These people might be being held at completely different buildings, though. I didn't really think of it like
possible, yeah. Or they could be all experimented on at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a black site for a reason. So weird. Like, you're not allowed to go to Cuba, but the United States has a base there where they torture people.
Yeah.
Yep. Where they do stuff they're not allowed to on American soil, I guess.
Mm-hmm. The lesser-known migrant center has been operational since the 1990s. The Biden administration used the facility to house a small number of migrants so they could be resettled to third countries. It just says third countries. I guess like a third party, like they came from one place, went to the United States, and there's a third country.
Maybe.
Kind of interesting that I've never heard of it, and Biden was using it too. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, the corporate media is not going to mention it when Biden's doing it, but as soon as Trump does it, it's like front page news.
Right. Well, there's a left-wing media bias already. We know that. And, you know, when their favorite leftists are in power, they're not going to talk about what the left is doing because, you know, they don't want to kill the golden goose.
I remember when Biden first took office, how things were getting so much worse as far as deportations, and nobody was mentioning that. It's like the whole argument for why you're supposed to vote for Biden and not vote for Trump, allegedly, according to the leftists, was partially because Trump is going to do all these horrible things to immigrants, and then Biden starts immediately doing them, and crickets.
Well, you can go back farther, too. A lot of people are forgetful, but the Clintons started building the wall in the first place.
Whoa. I think I have heard that, but I hadn't heard much about the wall in a really long time. I don't even know if I heard Trump talking about the wall this time. Is he still planning on building it?
I have no idea.
I think I've heard a couple of, you know, him just like referencing the wall, but he hasn't made any major announcements for infrastructure builds.
I saw a little like anime somebody made, a Trump related anime, and you know they're fighting, and then they are like, all right, now I'm gonna pull out my special power that I have. And his was like, he did, you know, like some kind of hand signs, and like a force field comes around him, and then a giant wall pops up in front of him.
That's funny.
He was fighting like Kim Jong-un. Wait, I don't remember if it the one that's alive now. Un or Il?
Un.
Okay.
Un.
Yeah. The chunky one. Well, so this is kind of interesting stuff. I just didn't know it went on at all. It says that the International Refugee Assistance Project revealed in a report last year through interviews with detainees and former staff that the center, which was characterized as a dilapidated building with mold and sewage problems, housed families with young children alongside single adults. Detainees were denied confidential phone calls, including with lawyers, and weren't allowed to reveal any accounts of mistreatment, the report said. Whoa. This is just, why are there children there? If this is supposed to be, don't worry, Bonnie, it's only the most horrible criminals. Why are there children there? These flights set the stage for egregious rights violations, indefinite detention, and crushing family separation, said Hannah Flam, interim senior director of policy for the International Refugee Assistance Project. The United States has a deplorable history of detaining different groups of people unlawfully at Guantanamo to avoid oversight in the public eye, and this latest chapter is no exception. Yeah, that's one big reason to talk about Guantanamo at all, because I feel like a lot of people you talk to don't know anything about it.
Yep, I think that's true. And I don't even know how I guess I don't understand the whole argument for being able to do things at Guantanamo that you can't do in America. I've seen the practice camps set up at, there's an army camp at the south end of the Salt Lake Valley right across from where they built the huge NSA data bank. I think it's called Camp Williams. But if you drive past there, I've driven past it, seen that they have like this gigantic field out front, and I've seen it just set up with rows and rows of white A-frame tents.
Is that
like
near Orem?
Like they're practicing
That might be near
concentration camp type setup.
Really?
And it's kind of near Orem. It's on the other side of the lake.
That's where I got my military ID last. I've been there.
Okay.
Like, weird.
That's where they built the NSA data bank, and there's always a highway patrol car just sitting at the end of that driveway with its lights on, and it doesn't look like a spectacular building. Most of it's underground.
I've never seen the NSA. I had no idea it was that close where I lived. Interesting.
Yeah, I used to drive down there just to look around every once in a while, because there's a highway that goes right in between the two, and then you can look off to the left and see Camp Williams, and off to the right and see the NSA stuff. But
I've probably driven like right by there if it's what I'm thinking of. If it's the same highway I'm thinking of.
Yeah, it's in.
Never knew it was there.
The name of that city is Bluffdale.
Oh, I said Orem and I meant Ophir. Either way, we're just like talking about Utah places now.
Yeah, Orem is the one just north of Provo, and that's kind of on the other side of Utah Lake from there.
I forgot about the name Orem at all. It just like popped out of my mouth when I was thinking of a Utah place that started with an O. Why were we talking about the NSA thing? There was a reason.
Oh, because we were talking about camps, and I was just saying that I didn't know why they need to use military base in Cuba to do these things when they have plenty of bases in
That's
the US.
A good point. There's lots of underground space at Dugway Proving Ground. I mean, I'm sure they're already doing things that they don't want the average person to know about there. So it's like, why are you telling them about this thing they're probably already doing? I'm just saying that, do they really need to do it in Cuba when they can do it underground in Utah?
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the question I was asking.
Yeah, interesting.
It does spark an interesting question, and maybe they don't want to do certain things on U.S. soil, so it doesn't come back to them and haunt them later. So maybe they take them to Guantanamo and, use them for experiments or whatever they're going to do there to torture them or to control them or to destroy them, so that it doesn't come back to haunt them and they're not in the neighborhood of the United States anymore.
Or maybe they just want us to believe that because they want us to believe, they only do this to these few thousand people. And they have to do it in Cuba. And it's really way more rampant. Well, we do have a caller on the line, so I'm going to bring Gigi in. Okay, the computer says South Carolina, but that's wrong, right? Gigi, you're in North Carolina?
No, it is South Carolina.
Okay, then I fixed it.
Hello, Mrs. Freeman.
Hello, how are you?
Good to hear your voice, dear.
It's good to hear yours,
Number one, Guantanamo is U.S. soil, technically, legally, territorially. So to say, I don't know who one of the hosts was who just said a moment earlier, maybe they use Guantanamo to be off U.S. soil. That is legally, territorially, and technically incorrect.
Thanks for letting us know.
For calling, pardon?
Thanks for letting us know.
Oh, I didn't mean that to sound like, being rude, but being a geography junkie and a former international relations professor, just one of my pet peeves. I say it lovingly. I love this program.
Good.
Okay. My comment. I am cracking up hysterical every day when I hear on the radio or read in the papers or watch all of the different news broadcasts, which I pride myself on, from ultra-liberal to ultra-conservative and things in between, crazy complaining chronically of President Trump's executive orders and this and that. And I'm laughing while I watch it or listen or read it because he's not deviating from anything he promised he was going to do on the campaign trail. And once again, history shows a democratically elected politician kept his promises just like Adolf Hitler. And my question for the evening is, my husband and I are asking very supportively and very, very friendly. The 5th of February was Ian Freeman's appeal. Bonnie, can you please shed some light on how it went?
Oh, so we talked about it in the last segment, but basically...
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. Excuse me.
Oh, it's okay.
I think I can recap it. There wasn't a lot to how it went so much. It was just
Was it negative and disappointing?
No, it was rather neutral is the feeling I get. And it was just lawyers talking about,
Crap.
their viewpoints on it, and then the judges asking questions having to do with the court transcript and what their arguments.
The written brief was already submitted prior to the oral element of the appeal, but I want to know, were any decisions at the oral argument granted in favor of Ian?
No,
no decisions were made at all.
So we're still living in limbo.
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's basically all that the point was of that particular hearing, was just for the judges to be able to ask questions, and now they're back to deciding amongst themselves, or not amongst themselves, I think, for themselves before they come out.
Well, the appellate level has 3 judges, and they can dissent, they can agree, they can split decisions, generally between 2 and 3 weeks, depending upon the abundance of briefs that particular appellate court has to read and hear. That usually pertains to the amount of time until attorneys receive the decision. I don't know how many issues, how many arguments did Ian's appellate attorneys present on Mr. Freeman's behalf. Was it more than one argument? Was there more than one issue that Ian's attorneys were concerned about reversing?
Yeah, he appealed 6 of the charges.
Issues.
Well, 6 of the charges, and
So 6
each charge
issues.
could have more than one like issue with the charge brought up, if that's what you're saying.
No, that's not what I'm saying. There were 6 elements based on his conviction, plural.
No, that's the thing. There were definitely more elements, because in just one charge they were able to bring up. So here are elements that weren't elements of each charge that weren't proven in court, and this is our argument about that. So,
well, then I'm very confused as someone who is published on the appellate level in 2 different states. If something is not on the original record, you are not legally permitted in any state to bring it up on appeal. So something doesn't jive.
I don't know what you mean there. I'm not saying that there was anything not brought up in the record. They were arguing.
So in other words, in the oral arguments on behalf of Mr. Freeman, his attorneys were concerned on all 6 convictions.
Well, 6 out of 7.
Okay. So now it's a question of simply waiting for the judges, there were 3 of them, to present their opinions on all 6 charges.
Yep.
Some could be overturned, some could remain as is, some could be changed. They do have that power legally. All 3 judges.
Well, basically, they would say where they're going to send it back, and they could completely drop them. They could send them back to the. Well, I don't understand why you're asking me.
Yes,
so like for the listener,
I am familiar with the procedure in terms of appellate law. It is the same in every state and federal territory. My husband and I are simply very, very curious and rather perplexed, because the more federal charges we hear about convicted individuals, male or female, especially first-time offenders, we find the convictions, plural, against Mr. Freeman more and more bizarre.
Well, that makes sense if it's just political persecution.
Right.
Well, quite honestly, we feel that Ian is the so-called bag boy, doormat, being used as an example. If you notice, the current administration, one of the family businesses is now crypto.
Yeah, I have noticed.
Where does that leave Mr. Freeman?
We don't know.
I am not saying that to be facetious. I say that in support of Mr. Freeman.
Yeah, hopefully that leaves him in a better place, right?
Do you know? Can you please tell me, Bonnie? Was that an issue raised at argument on behalf of Ian by his attorneys?
What?
That would be a violation according to what you said earlier, right?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
No,
because that wasn't argued originally.
A charge.
I don't know what are you asking? What
legal?
What was your question? What was brought
The
up?
fact that the Trump administration favors incorporating cryptocurrency as a legitimate form of capitalism, legal tenure, interacting in terms of mercantilism and capitalism, and that the Trump family industries also now include crypto as a business.
No, they basically brought up that before 2021, which is when Ian was charged with things,
yes,
they hadn't said in Congress, this is how we classify crypto. And,
correct.
And he was being charged with crypto, assuming it was classified in a specific way. And it doesn't make any sense because that was just the regulatory kind of like what they decided that crypto should be classified as, but Congress hadn't decided that. So therefore, the argument is that, well, you can't just charge somebody with that because the regulatory agencies were acting a certain way when they couldn't have possibly known what Congress was going to decide about cryptocurrency before cryptocurrency was even invented. So that's like the main argument. I think if Riley's going to make a podcast about it, be a great place to go get all these very specific answers. And I'll
try to do my best. I don't think I really laid out specifics on my podcast, but I did put part of the arguments in my podcast.
Yep. So you can hear about it there, but honestly, I didn't take notes on purpose. Sometimes you just like want to go there and listen and take things in more like, oh, how did they react to that? And not like take deep notes. So I didn't do that. So thank you for the call, Gigi. I also agree. I think Ian is being his attack was politically motivated, and it seems very bizarre that he is sitting in prison right now for selling cryptocurrency. And I also hope that the current administration doesn't feel the same way about cryptocurrency as like Elizabeth Warren, one of the people that was buddying up with Joe Biden to go after tons of crypto adjacent people like Tornado Cash guys and the Samurai Wallet guys and Ian and the library case.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the Trump administration addresses the cryptocurrency world upcoming, because I want to know what they think of altcoins, and I want to know what they think of decentralized exchanges.
I heard somewhere that Tornado Cash guys were released from prison.
I saw that one was released, but I didn't see the other. But yeah, I didn't look up like why was that? Like were there things charged? So 603-283-6160. It's Free Talk Live. You can call 603-283-6160. More Free Talk Live coming up, and you can bring up whatever is on your mind. Don't go anywhere. It's Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people like passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
The latest episode of Free Talk Live continues with Hour 3 up next after the news here at listen.freetalklive.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Haya. China is accusing Donald Trump of weaponizing trade after he announced he's imposing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium entering the United States. The US president also says he's planning reciprocal tariffs on any country currently taxing American products. From Washington, Nick Harper reports.
There are fears now of a spiralling trade war, with Donald Trump telling reporters on Sunday on board Air Force One that on Monday he'll be announcing a new tariff, 25% on any steel and aluminium entering the United States. And he promised an announcement on reciprocal tariffs on Tuesday or Wednesday, saying it would apply to every country, adding very simply, if they charge us, we charge them.
China, though, has already imposed retaliatory tariffs on the US, hitting about $14 billion worth of goods. Beijing laid out those tariffs last week in response to the White House's decision to impose an additional 10% levy on Chinese products. Our Asia correspondent Laura Westbrook has the details.
China's measures target US exports of liquefied natural gas, coal, crude oil and farm equipment, as well as some automotive goods, with levies of 10 to 15%. Delaying the start of the tariffs and the targeted approach by Beijing had been seen as creating space for negotiations to try to avert a wider trade conflict. But when the deadline passed on Sunday, there was no news of a deal, and Beijing announced the tariffs were in effect.
Hamas says it's delaying the release of Israeli hostages until further notice, accusing Israel of breaching the Gaza ceasefire agreement. The terror group claims Israel violated the deal by delaying the return of displaced persons to northern Gaza, targeting them with shelling and failing to allow the entry of humanitarian aid. Israel calls the decision itself a complete violation of the ceasefire, which began last month. 17 Israeli hostages, some dead, were still due to be released in the first phase of the ceasefire, the next swap due on Saturday. President Trump has condemned Hamas over the state of 3 Israeli hostages released last weekend, saying they were in a horrible condition. Charles Gibson is in Tel Aviv.
As well as comparing the 3 Israeli men released by Hamas to Holocaust victims, President Trump said that at some point we're going to lose our patience. All 3 were visibly gaunt as TV cameras filmed them being transferred to the Red Cross inside Gaza on Saturday. However, the Israeli government is also facing criticism over the condition of some of the Palestinian prisoners released the same day. The Palestinian Red Crescent says that 7 out of the 183 were admitted to hospital after being handed over by Israeli authorities.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, a view from overseas of the gutting by President Donald Trump and Elon Musk of the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. The provider of more than 40% of the total global budget for humanitarian assistance and development aid, it is mothballed, though a federal judge on Friday issued a temporary restraining order that prevents the White House from laying off its 10,000 members of staff. President Trump claims, without providing evidence, that fraud was committed at USAID. Mr. Musk argues it was wasting taxpayer money on woke causes. Michael Keating is a professor of international economy at Richmond American University, London, and says the agency's shutdown is impacting American companies and employees disproportionately.
US aid is dispersed by private sector companies employing a lot of Americans. These private companies are laying workers off now. And you're hearing that they don't really want to pick fights over these what are potentially breaches of contract, because they also get other sorts of government contracts and they don't want to be on the radar of the Trump administration. So they're just firing American workers, basically.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio is now tasked with evaluating USAID's programs to determine whether they align with President Trump's national security priorities. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
A reminder of our top stories again. China is accusing US President Donald Trump of weaponizing trade after he announced he's imposing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium entering the United States. China's already imposed retaliatory tariffs on the US, hitting about $14 billion worth of goods. And Hamas says it's delaying the release of Israeli hostages until further notice, accusing Israel of breaching the Gaza ceasefire agreement. That's the latest feature story news. I'm Benji Haya in Washington.
While getting drinks after work with a group of co-workers, local shipping clerk Russell Chambliss told reporters Wednesday night he was unsure whether he was bonding with his male associates or being mercilessly bullied by them.
I'm pretty sure that Bill called me limp dick earlier, and Todd keeps punching me in the shoulder. Pretty hard, too. I can't tell if it's their way of letting me feel like I'm part of the group or making me feel bad about myself.
Chambliss said while his coworkers verbally demeaned him and even made him feel physically threatened at various points in the evening, they did so with large smiles on their faces, making it extremely unclear if his coworkers enjoyed his company or wanted him to leave the bar.
Well, I told Jeff about this problem that I was having with my girlfriend, and he called me a pussy and then walked away. But then, like 5 minutes later, he came back with a beer that he had bought for me. What does that even mean? Apparently I'm invited over to Todd's house for dinner this weekend. I guess that'll be fun.
For more on this story, keep checking theonion.com.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It's Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control in 603-283-6160 is the phone number. That's 603-283-6160. And are you tired of the oppressive rules and moderation of the big tech social media sites? Our Mastodon server at social.freetalklive.com can set you free. Mastodon is free, open source, decentralized, and federated. Multiple apps are available for iOS, Android, Windows, Mac, and Linux. Social.freetalklive.com. And with you on the show tonight, Free Talk Live, you've got me, Bonnie.
Riley.
And Stu.
And we already have a caller on the line, so let's go straight to, I'm pretty sure this is Kadu in Connecticut. Is it? Are you there?
I'm not Kadu, but did you press the wrong button?
Nope, I didn't press the wrong button. I just, for some reason, thought this name was Kadu. My bad. What's your name and topic, please?
Yeah, so my name is Matthew. I'm calling because I normally don't call, but I heard Gigi called in, and it really makes me question if she knows how international relations work, because she's completely wrong on Guantanamo Bay. So Guantanamo Bay is Cuban soil. It's
Google told me the same.
Cuba. It's recognized by both Cuba and America as being Cuban soil. It's just that America administrates it.
And they say they have jurisdiction there, like the United States claims jurisdiction, but that doesn't mean that it's U.S. soil, so you're right.
They have a jackboot lease similar to the Hong Kong or Shanghai situations.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they actually, so the U.S. pays Cuba. They send a check every year. I can't remember what the amount is, but Cuba refuses to cash it because they don't see the lease as being valid, even though it's been enforced since I think it's 1905.
Wow.
So it's been around for a while.
Whoa.
But so the thing that's surprising about that is that Gigi claimed her authority by saying like she's an international relations person, so that's what she knows about. So now when she talks about being an appellate lawyer, it kind of calls into question her expertise, because like that fundamental fact being wrong seems to indicate that she may not know what she's talking about.
Yep, seems like that should be a pretty easy one. It seemed wrong to me too, and I should have looked it up in real time.
I looked it up but forgot to mention it on the air, and I was just thinking maybe she kind of got something, like when giving her the benefit of the doubt, maybe she kind of got it mixed up in that they say they have jurisdiction there, but that's not the same at all.
Well, so the thing that's surprising is because that's why all the people, like all the people that are being quote unquote tortured, are in Guantanamo Bay, because it is not U.S. soil. The entire reason why the Gitmo prison complex exists is because it's not U.S. soil. So, like, the fact that she doesn't seem to understand that, like, that's the fundamental argument of why that entire infrastructure exists. It's just kind of strange.
I thought that was the case, and I think it's kind of stupid. And they should just, if they're going to torture, they should just do it, and wherever.
Well, the United States, it seems, is all built on this facade. Like, as long as the people think a certain way, like they think they're free, then things work better for them in their way. I mean, in their view.
If I may, if I can pivot to something that came up after I called.
Sure.
You mentioned Elizabeth. I think Stu mentioned Elizabeth Warren. Did any of you happen to see the RFK hearing confirmation for where Elizabeth Warren stepped in it in a big way?
No.
So basically, she talked about, she wanted him to promise that he wouldn't accept any money from pharmaceutical companies if for 5 years after he left government service. And he said, absolutely not. Like, I don't even think they'd pay me, because they hate me. I hate them. I sue them all the time. And then she asked him to promise that he wouldn't sue pharmaceutical companies for negligence. And he said, that's the dumbest promise I've ever heard. Why would I promise not to sue pharmaceutical companies that are injuring people? It's just crazy to see how things have flipped in the Trump administration.
I did hear the Bernie Sanders part of that confirmation hearing, and RFK was not shy about telling Bernie Sanders that he was one of the biggest offenders of taking this big pharma lobby money, and Bernie had some non sequitur arguments and a bunch of fallacies to throw at him, call him an anti-vaxxer, all of that good stuff.
Yeah, well, it's funny because like Joe Rogan harps on it a lot, where he points out the fact that when you look at legacy media companies, so like the big television stations, the big internet companies, all of them make 60 to 70% of their revenue from pharmaceutical companies. So
brought to you by Pfizer.
Yeah. Why would they ever say anything critical about vaccines, medications? One of my favorite medications is they make medications for OIC, which is opiate-induced constipation. So, like, if anyone that's ever done opiates would know that one of the side effects is you get blocked up. I got to keep it FCC friendly, but so instead of just being like, hey, maybe we should not prescribe so many opiates, they're like, no, we're going to make a drug so that you can take all the opiates you want and you won't get backed up. And it's like, this is like, if I was to take the issue with the pharmaceutical industrial complex and distill it into one argument, it would be that. Like, we made a drug for the fact that we overprescribe opiates.
Yeah, and then they advertise it on TV as well.
Yeah, and then they can stack all the drugs onto you they want and make you poor.
I think it's one of 2 countries in the world that allows this type of terrible advertising, where they're like, ask your doctor. Like, shouldn't my doctor be asking me?
Well, one thing I remember, Bonnie may have seen this when she was in San Antonio, is that I would drive around there, and there would be billboards for PrEP, which is pre-exposure prophylaxis. So it's basically drugs you can take to not get HIV from someone who is HIV positive. It was like, well, there's a much easier way to do that. Like, you don't need to take a pill. You can just not do that. But they've got billboards around advertising it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I definitely think people should be on PrEP if they're going to be if like, the thing is, like, yeah, you can just not do that. But if you're going to do that, I think you should be on PrEP. I remember somebody I knew who's stupid was prostituting herself and my gay friend was like, "Are you on PrEP?" And she's like, "No, I don't need that. I'm not a gay guy." Yeah, but you're prostituting yourself.
That was one of the myths they started back in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was only going to affect gay guys. But
I mean,
there's nothing inherently immoral about having a loose sexuality, so to speak. And if a person wants to make that choice, then and it doesn't hurt anybody,
as long as you're not hurting anybody and you're consenting and everyone involved in that agreement in that situation is consenting, then.
But I would bet that there is side effects I've never heard of about PrEP. I never really thought about it because it's like so quote unquote normal among like gay people. Like they're all on PrEP.
Right. I wouldn't trust the pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
And I would be concerned enough about the side effects that I wouldn't take it, even if I wanted to have that kind of a lifestyle, and I would probably just make smarter choices.
I'm sure that you can still get it on PrEP. It's probably like, oh, well, it's only this much % effective. I mean, I never looked into it. I also don't specifically remember those advertisements, but I believe it.
Well, I mean, so it's PrEP is PrEP is basically as effective as birth control. So it's like it's not completely effective, but it's close. But I mean, if you have any questions, Aria has admitted to being on PrEP based on her activities. So if you have questions, she can probably answer them.
Okay. Anything else for us?
No, thank you.
Thanks for the call. We have another caller on the line. Tom in New Hampshire, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Yeah, good evening. Of course, Donald Trump is lining up prison cells in El Salvador's notorious prison down in Central America to lock up. First they come for the criminal aliens, and so you're not going to have a whole lot of opposition to them. I mean, if they're criminals and they're from Central America, why should we care whether they're returned to Guatemala or El Salvador or Nicaragua? And couldn't even point out which one is which on a map, even if the names are right there, because they're too stupid to know how to read a map, most of them. So they wouldn't care which country the federal government sends those criminal aliens to. But what he's really doing is, first they came for the criminal aliens principle, and then they start expanding it. He really wants to get Liz Cheney and Mike Pence and Jack Smith, the federal prosecutor down in Florida, and some of his the so-called enemies, these people who had the nerve to go after him for his crimes in his first administration, and he wants to put them in Central American prisons in order to intimidate people into falling in line with them. And the thing is, if you impeach Trump, they do have grounds for it, firing some people that he didn't have lawful authority to fire, and also the executive order on birthright citizenship, which is not only unconstitutional but also a violation of the Immigration and Nationality Act.
It makes no sense. I mean, I looked quickly while reading an article at what the 14th Amendment says about citizenship, and it seems pretty black and white.
Yep.
It seems pretty black and white. I can't believe. I'm pretty sure that's one of those things that he said he put that executive order or whatever just because knowing it's going to get overturned, just so he can tell his followers, like, listen, I tried. Because there's no way it's going to stand.
Anyway, so they have grounds to impeach him for that executive order and also for various unlawful firings of persons that he doesn't have authority to fire without a certain process. He tried to fire one member of the Federal Elections Commission, and first you have to nominate and have a nominee confirmed to replace that person before you can fire them. And you have to explain why you're firing them and all that other stuff. Some of the stuff that he's done is clearly unlawful, and the way to sell it to the Republicans is, look, you're just going to wind up with J.D. Vance, another Republican, but he doesn't want to be dictator. He just wants to be president of the United States. Okay, he'd rather be president of the United States. So, you impeach Trump, and then the Senate has a majority of Republicans, and
they impeached him before, and nothing happened.
They impeach him, but the Republicans, if they ever say enough is enough, that's the problem is that it's a majority of Republicans in the Senate, and even when it's not, you got to have a 2/3 majority to convict somebody. Mitt Romney was the only Republican to vote to convict Trump on anything, and that was when he did that. There was 2 impeachments, and he voted to acquit. He said not guilty on one and guilty on the other, and that tells me at least he's going by what he honestly feels the evidence shows. Okay, so he's trying to do it right, not just follow party lines. He's going by what the evidence actually shows as far as he can tell. But yeah, you got grounds for impeachment, and you can contact J.D. Vance at U.S. Senate, Washington, D.C. Just write that on there, and I've sent him some postcards at his U.S. Senator office in Ohio to tell him, look, you're the last line of defense.
I don't know. Why do you think that he would be open to that? It seems like he likes Trump.
Yeah, but he'd rather be president.
I don't know. I don't know that that's the case.
He cannot preside over the impeachment because when the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside. So he wouldn't preside over it, but he can say, look, I mean, it's time.
Then why is he the last line of defense?
A lot of Republicans would rather have J.D. Vance than a dictator wannabe Adolf Hitler type.
Well, you can keep on hoping. I just don't see it happening. Didn't happen last time, and there was a lot more people that hated him then, I'd say.
Yeah, they impeached him twice, and both times failed.
Yeah, I forget what the second part is. Like, they impeached him, but then why didn't he actually have to leave? There's like a second part.
I don't remember.
It
was, I think, near the end of his administration, so who knows?
I have a hard time following WWE, especially like the more nitpicky parts of it.
Yeah, that is like nitpicky. Yeah. It was so like boring. I remember where it was when I heard like Donald Trump got impeached. I was like, whoa. So he's like, you're not going to be president anymore. Who is? And it just never came. Like he just continued being president. So I was like, what's that even mean now? Oh well, kind of. I just kind of don't care. I don't. Well, here's one thing I'll say. Apparently, there's this like whole idea that everyone knows like the vice presidents almost never become president. It's like a dead end. So unless you're like, if you really wanted to become president, I don't think you would go that route. Like, oh, I'll become vice president, and then hopefully Trump will get impeached. I don't know. So maybe he doesn't really want to be president. You don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know how all of that works.
Yep. I mean, like obviously, if Trump got killed, then he'd be president. But I don't know. For whatever reason, vice presidents don't usually become president like in any other way. Apparently it's happened before, but whatever.
Seems like a lot of times vice presidents run for president later and then lose. I don't know. Al Gore did it, and then recently, Kamala did it, and I don't know. That's just kind of how it seems to me, but
it was like so. It was a really special, I guess you'd say, situation with Kamala running. It wasn't like a normal situation. So I'm getting this to myself so we can read this story that you sent us to. What is this? What's the topic of what we're about to talk about? Basically, why did it interest you?
Is that the Roger thing?
Oh, you just sent me the thing about Roger. So yeah, we did need to mention this.
Yeah. Roger had possibly his last interview in freedom because he lost. Whoa. He was denied his appeal on extradition.
Wow.
And so he expects to be picked up and hauled off to America anytime now to face, I don't know, more than 100 years worth of charges that they've stacked on him.
That's absolutely absurd.
That's horrible. Getting extradited. I remember somebody saying that he just fears that he will never leave prison if he ends up being extradited. Now he's basically just sitting there waiting to be extradited. It says, a Spanish court rejected Ver's appeal to extradition. Extradition to the U.S. could happen anytime. And then he was interviewed, as you said, by Alex Jones. It says, Alex Jones calls on the president to pardon Ver. I hope that he pays attention to Alex, I hope that that's something that that'll get to him. I feel like if Alex Jones says something to the president, it might get to his ear.
Maybe, but Alex Jones.
Well, Alex Jones has a lot of listeners, so if his listeners take this up as one of their pet projects, then they might make a big enough wave. But yeah, who knows?
But
who knows how this
Musk
one goes.
might have more influence, and Musk has already said that it pays to be a member of the club, so to speak.
Yeah. I don't know if he has more.
As part of this interview, I didn't get to watch the whole thing. I didn't have enough time, but in part of it, he addressed that and said that he doesn't consider himself like he doesn't want to be outside of the club. He just feels like he was chased out. Mm-hmm. And he's got a good argument for that because they've been after him for a really long time.
That is a good point, yeah.
The ATF busted down his door for selling explosives because he had an online fireworks sales company.
Yep.
How absurd. How absurd.
Yep.
That was an important update we needed to bring up that, Roger Ver is being extradited to the United States pretty much any time now. Very sad. It's just like things get a whole lot worse for you as soon as you're extradited when you have the Eye of Sauron on you.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, glad we brought that up and were able to tell the people about it. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Their question is, where's Doge when you need it? And their idea is basically they think that Trump isn't going after the most important things using Doge, meaning the Department of Government Efficiency. So I want to see what they think is so ancillary about what Doge is doing, and what do they think he should actually, like the president and Elon should actually be going after. And apparently they're 19-year-old cronies. They're not cronies. I don't know why I said cronies. That implies like that they're criminals. I guess I meant to say like their team, but cronies came out.
Yeah.
Well, cronies makes a lot more sense there.
Yeah.
Well, whenever I'm talking about the government, I often say stuff like that. So
maybe you meant to say groupies.
Maybe. So, no, I actually think that those people are kind of cool because they I don't know if they're hackers or what, but they used internet and AI skills to audit a government entity and find where they were doing spending money on stupid things. So I actually really didn't mean to call them cronies. I just I thought of group or something like that. So Elon Musk and the White House are moving fast to shrink the bureaucracy, or at least the easy targets, is what Wall Street Journal says. It's so weird. I feel like USAID is huge, but they say, but maybe they should pay more attention to the administrative state that grinds ahead with the Biden agenda. Consider the Justice Department's antitrust lawsuit last week seeking to block Hewlett-Packard Enterprises' $14 billion acquisition of Juniper Networks. Do you guys know anything about this? Because I don't.
No, I don't know anything about it either.
Biden Assistant Attorney General Jonathan Cantor reviewed the deal but didn't pull the trigger before leaving. So why is the Trump administration going ahead? Hard to figure. The tie-up would create a stronger competitor to Cisco in the wireless business networking market. Cisco boasts a roughly 50% share, while HPE has about 17% and Juniper has 7%. I'm wondering why they think this is way more important. It says it would also give business customers a complete stack of technologies, including networking, router switching, storage, and AI systems that no company besides China's Huawei offers. Interesting. Huawei is banned in the US for national security reasons. Many businesses prefer to use one company for all technology solutions. European and UK regulators cleared the deal, yet the DOJ lawsuit says the deal would increase overall market concentration in the wireless networking market and supposedly hurt smaller rivals. Who are these small fry? Big businesses like Fortinet and Arista that compete with Hewlett-Packard Enterprises and Juniper across a range of other technologies. All this makes the Trump administration's attempt to block the deal mystifying. Mr. Trump tapped Omid Assefi to run the DOJ's antitrust shop until his nominee Gail Slater is confirmed. Mr. Assefi says HPE and Juniper seek to consolidate rather than to continue to compete as rivals in the wireless networking market. This sounds like the Biden neo-brandyisms, I don't know what that means, who jettisoned the consumer welfare standard that has guided antitrust laws for 4 decades. Because they want to consolidate instead of competing as rivals.
Yeah. This is This is kind of the problem with deregulation, is it just makes bigger monsters of corporations.
And I guess Trump's going along with it, or at least Mr. Anseffi is. Or Anseffi.
Well, it's kind of what came out of the whole Ronald Reagan deregulation era. We just got more gigantic, powerful corporations.
Interesting. That would be a really good angle. I mean, like...
They said it would trickle down, but I haven't seen much of that.
Neither have I.
603-283-6160. More coming up. Don't go anywhere. It's Free Talk Live.
If you're looking for work, you know the math. There are many more applicants than openings, so you need to stand out, not blend into the blah, blah, blah your interviewer is hearing from your competition. Here's a tip. In your interview, you will be judged more by the questions you ask than the answers you give. Yes, do anticipate the obvious job interview questions and prepare concise, insightful, glass-half-full sounding responses. And you should interview your interviewer. Seem genuinely curious about what will help get results. With money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important. You want to cut through the clutter. For more tips for job seekers and making all the other conversations you have more productive, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Benji Hire. China is accusing Donald Trump of weaponizing trade after he announced he's imposing 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium entering the United States. The US president also says he's planning reciprocal tariffs on any country currently taxing American products. From Washington, Nick Harper reports.
There are fears now of a spiralling trade war, with Donald Trump telling reporters on Sunday on board Air Force One that on Monday he'll be announcing a new tariff, 25% on any steel and aluminium entering the United States. And he promised an announcement on reciprocal tariffs on Tuesday or Wednesday, saying it would apply to every country, adding very simply, if they charge us, we charge them.
China, though, has already imposed retaliatory tariffs on the US, hitting about $14 billion worth of goods. Beijing laid out those tariffs last week in response to the White House's decision to impose an additional 10% levy on Chinese products. Our Asia correspondent Laura Westbrook has the details.
China's measures target US exports of liquefied natural gas, coal, crude oil and farm equipment, as well as some automotive goods, with levies of 10 to 15%. Delaying the start of the tariffs and the targeted approach by Beijing had been seen as creating space for negotiations to try to avert a wider trade conflict. But when the deadline passed on Sunday, there was no news of a deal, and Beijing announced the tariffs were in effect.
Hamas says it's delaying the release of Israeli hostages until further notice, accusing Israel of breaching the Gaza ceasefire agreement. The terror group claims Israel violated the deal by delaying the return of displaced persons to northern Gaza, targeting them with shelling and failing to allow the entry of humanitarian aid. Israel calls the decision itself a complete violation of the ceasefire, which began last month. 17 Israeli hostages, some dead, were still due to be released in the first phase of the ceasefire, the next swap due on Saturday. President Trump has condemned Hamas over the state of 3 Israeli hostages released last weekend, saying they were in a horrible condition. Charles Gibson is in Tel Aviv.
As well as comparing the 3 Israeli men released by Hamas to Holocaust victims, President Trump said that at some point we're going to lose our patience. All 3 were visibly gaunt as TV cameras filmed them being transferred to the Red Cross inside Gaza on Saturday. However, the Israeli government is also facing criticism over the condition of some of the Palestinian prisoners released the same day. The Palestinian Red Crescent says that 7 out of the 183 were admitted to hospital after being handed over by Israeli authorities.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
Free Talk Live, talk radio that you control, and 603-283-6160 is the phone number. That's 603-283-6160. Some of you have wanted to support Free Talk Live's mission on a monthly basis, but don't want to support Patreon. Now we have an alternative that also helps our premier streaming platform, Odyssey. Visit video.freetalklive.com and click join at the top of the channel. You can subscribe for $5 per month, and unlike other subscription services, Odyssey adds their processing fee on top, so it will cost a little over $5 per month, but Free Talk Live will receive the entire amount you pledged. You can get a special membership badge that is visible in the Odyssey chat room if we get enough supporters, and if we get enough supporters, we may enable members-only chat. Actually, we did, since that ad was written, enable members-only because there was too much spam. With you on Free Talk Live, you've got me, Bonnie.
Riley.
And Stu.
And you can call 603-283-6160 to get in on the conversation with us. We have a caller on the line, so let's go to the phones. David in New Mexico, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Stuff. Law, Bonnie, law. And I changed the lyrics for you.
Mm-hmm.
It's now, let the Bonnies hit the floor, let the Bonnies hit the floor.
Yeah. I used to think about that every time I heard that song. I was like, oh, if I just think of it that way, it sounds like it.
The dance floor.
Okay.
Let the Bonnies hit the, get on, yeah. What's your
That's a better way to
music?
think of it, because sometimes I get creeped out when I hear that song. Because if you can do this yourself, if that song's playing and you tell your brain, no, it's saying let the Bonnies hit the floor, it starts to sound like it, and then that's creepy. For me.
No,
as a Bonnie.
It's disco night at the gay bar, Bonnie.
But now I'll think of it as as the dance floor, and that will make it better. Anything else?
Yeah.
Well, what's on your mind about law, David?
What do you mean? Well, like Ian's appeal, and like impeachment, and like the 14th Amendment, and like the Immigration and Naturalization Act. That kind of law.
What do you think about all this kind of law?
Well, first of all, impeachment, let me answer your question. You were wondering, why was he impeached and then he didn't leave? Because impeachment just means that you're taken to trial, and then you have to be convicted, and he wasn't convicted.
Oh.
He was acquitted.
Oh, wow.
He was not impeached. The impeachment failed.
I thought he was impeached twice, but he just wasn't convicted.
Right. Impeached is like being charged, and then he was acquitted of the impeachment charges.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And let me also interject here. I got Chris Wade beat. He was like however old, and guess what, Bonnie? When I was in first grade, that makes me 6 years old, and they had us do the Pledge of Allegiance, and I had never had any discussion about it with anybody, and it occurred to me as they were making us do the Pledge of Allegiance that this is indoctrination, this is programming, this is brainwashing. They shouldn't be doing it, and we should have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have any problem with the United States, but that was just my assessment of the situation, being told that we would now put our hands on our hearts and pledge allegiance to the United States.
Nice. I think that's cool, but I also don't know if you have Penguin beat, because I even if I said a specific age, I didn't mean that it was literally that. I was just guessing. I'm pretty sure since he can remember, it's the same thing.
How about this one then? How about this one? When I was 18 months old, that's less than 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 18, you know Nikola Tesla, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm 18 months old, and I'm in the living room of our apartment that we had at that time, and I'm looking at the little TV set sitting over there, and it's plugged in the wall. And the thought that's running through my head is, why does the electricity have to go through the wire? Why can't it just go through the air to what you want it to run?
That is so cool. You've told me that before, because I told you about my about 1 year old dream I remember having, and you said you also had a less than 2 year old memory of a thought, and I think that is so cool. That's
it was actually
pretty cool.
That was actually at the same. Yeah, the other thing I was telling you was it was the same age. I was the same age, 18. I just started. Well, no, that's not true. I was gonna say I just started walking, but that's not true. I wasn't walking all that well. It was really, really, really windy outside, and you know that thing. I mean, usually it's in a movie because it's not real, where somebody's walking into the wind and their body's at a 45-degree angle into the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I told my mom when I was 30 some years old, I said to my mom, Hey, I had this dream one time that I described the situation, and she looked at me, her face got all blank and her eyes wide, and she's like, that wasn't a dream, that really happened. I got caught out in the yard all by myself, and a windstorm came up, and I was literally like, I was trying to make my way to a clothesline pole to hang on to it so the wind wouldn't knock me down or blow me away or whatever. And I was like leaning into the wind, literally like at a 45-degree angle, because the wind was literally blowing like 60 miles an hour.
Wow.
That's so crazy.
That's crazy.
That was like that. The oldest I was. I might have been younger actually. I probably had just started walking because the electricity thing was after that, and I was probably about a year old when that. I just had been standing up and walking for I don't know, maybe a month or two.
That's so crazy that you were able to stand up against the wind.
Yeah, it was even crazier that it was pretty surreal. I mean, if you can imagine it being a little kid, and then literally, I remember looking down at my body and thinking, wow, this is really weird that you can like lean that far over and not fall down because the wind is holding you up.
You were like a really weird baby, but I think it's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I'm a really weird adult, Bonnie, so like nothing much has changed. What would you expect? I'm a weird adult, huh?
What did you have to say about the 14th Amendment and the birthright citizenship stuff? Because I find it so crazy that Trump can say that. Let me
explain that one to you also, because and don't get mad because we're fighting now, okay, Bonnie? So here we go. Ready? Fight. Okay, so you were saying that the 14th Amendment is pretty clear. Yes, it's very clear that if a baby falls out of your vagina on U.S. territory, that doesn't automatically make that baby a citizen. And here's why. Because the 14th Amendment, just like the Second Amendment says, and it says that very clearly, and they try to bastardize that one as well, the 14th Amendment says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Now, let me be a lawyer like Gigi and provide the proof. So, subject to the jurisdiction. So, like, if you're a citizen of Mexico or Guatemala or wherever...
Oh, it does say and subject, so born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction, but you could claim you're not.
That's right.
So if I'm a woman and I get drunk one night and I stumble across the border, I don't know I'm in the United States, and my baby falls out of my vagina, and then like 18 years later, the United States comes along and says, I'm back in Mexico, and I completely forgot about that drunk I was on, and I got across the border and the baby fell out. I completely forgot about that, and then I'm down in Mexico, like 1,000 miles from the border, and the U.S. government comes knocking and says, son of Mrs. So-and-so, we're drafting you into the United States military because you fell out of your mother's vagina on our territory. That makes you ours. So get this uniform on and get on and go kill these people we tell you to kill. How do you like that, Bonnie?
I'm not saying I like it at all.
Okay,
right.
And it's also
that's his way of illustrating that it's a ridiculous notion.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and also there is actually case law, as explained to me live.
But the thing is, I also find it ridiculous that even if you have considered yourself a citizen, that you should be forced to do that.
Yeah, true, but to keep the argument on the argument we were originally talking about, that's an example I like to use. Now I'm
just saying I don't really think that is that example you just gave is like, oh, and therefore it's ridiculous that makes you a citizen. It could be the case that made you a citizen, and you should still be able to be like, nah, man, I don't want to fight in this war. So I don't know. I'm not saying I actually believe anybody's subject to the jurisdiction. And if you just say you're not, you should just not be. Like, why the heck is being in some desert under the Rio Grande make you subject to jurisdiction? How do you decide that? How do they decide it?
True, but what we're trying to do here, Bonnie, is we're trying to supply an argument that they can't deny because it follows the logic and the law that they are using. But so if we use logic and law that they don't accept, they'll shut us down. So if we make an argument using logic and law that they have to accept, then they'll lose the argument. So let me give you a real life
I'm
case.
just helping you out by poking a hole in it. That they would probably poke in it.
Okay, well, thank you. Much appreciated. Okay, so let me give you a real life case that proves it probably better. because actually this won in a federal court. I was on the telephone with U.S. Rep. Paul Gosar from Arizona the other day, and he shared the case law that there was this exact thing happened. There was a French woman who was in the United States and dropped a baby out of her vagina, and then years later, when that baby was an adult, the U.S. government came to that baby that had fallen onto U.S. soil and said, "Hey, you owe us taxes." And that French baby, now an adult, went to federal court and won his case that no, you don't. I don't owe you any taxes because when I fell onto your territory as a baby, I'm not subject to, nor was my mother subject to the jurisdiction thereof, and he won.
Yeah, but that's what I want to know. What is the reason that he is able to prove that he's not subject to the jurisdiction? Like, just because he claimed it? Because, like, I like that, but I don't know if that's...
No, because
his parents are of a different nationality.
But when you're of a different nationality and you come to the United States, they say you're subject to jurisdiction. Therefore, like, if you commit murder, they can charge you. That's what they say.
That's a different kind of jurisdiction. There are many kinds of jurisdiction.
It just says the jurisdiction in this 14th Amendment.
No, it's all very confusing, and I know they like to make up the rules as they go along.
Oh yeah,
and they're never fair about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just says jurisdiction. That's because they, them, those. If you want to use Ernie Hancock, they, them, those know that in the context of a U.S. amendment, that jurisdiction means a certain thing. It doesn't have to do with common crimes like murder.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about a different form of jurisdiction, and all of the legal people know that. And so that's the answer to that question, Bonnie.
Interesting. That would be so interesting if you know that case to like Google it and find somebody who wrote up something about it.
I can do that and get back to you on that. Also, Huawei.
That's what somebody else already corrected me. I don't speak Chinese.
Got it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, but I know you're not necessarily insulting me, but I think the other guy was. Somebody said that.
Probably. And one of the things that Gigi was trying to get out of you is, oh, by the way, I did win an appeal at a state court of appeals, not a federal. But before I heard Gigi's call, in my mind, I was asking myself, okay, so Bonnie, what was the basis of the appeal? In other words, an appeal has to have a question. What is the question, the legal question that when you file the appeal that you want the appeals court to decide upon? So do you happen to recall, you said there were 6 different questions at a minimum. Do you remember what the questions of law that are at issue, that are at controversy, that
one
were
of them
submitted to the... Pardon?
Sorry, one of them that I remember is that, like, I'm not going to know it in the the exact terms that the lawyer put it in, but one of them is that for the running an unlicensed money transmitting business, and I think for the conspiracy, too, for that, it is that, well, could this possibly actually fall under the, is it possible that because of the major questions doctrine that this is a major question because the government, the court can't just decide to put cryptocurrency into the term funds when the government has a law about funds, when that law went into place before cryptocurrency was invented, and then regulators just decided to claim that it falls under that. It's actually Patriot Act law. See what I'm saying?
Kind of. If you want to clarify, feel free, or if you want to not approach that further, then that's fine.
I can try to clarify. So basically, there was a law in 2001-ish. It was a Patriot Act, one of the Patriot Act things that got passed, that said, it's the Bank Secrecy Act. There we go. And it says something about the government having the ability to do this or that concerning funds. And the thing is, the government charged Ian with that Bank Secrecy Act law, even though it's a major question because there's a thing called the Major Questions Doctrine. They don't even know that Bitcoin falls under funds because of the fact that how could Congress, when they passed the Bank Secrecy Act, how could they have told the future and known that Bitcoin would exist, that they couldn't have possibly been meaning to include Bitcoin under the term funds, but yet regulations have just decided, oh, we already know that they would include it, and we're going to regulate based on the Bank Secrecy Act, but they shouldn't have had that power to do so.
Got it. I get the gist of what you're saying, and I agree with you, and I don't know enough about all the intricacies of what had been previously defined and what remains yet to be defined and what they claim is defined but is not really defined. I'm not clear enough on all that, but I do agree with you on the general premise that there was not enough clarity to, established in law, in boilerplate, to say that Ian, to judge Ian by that, the boilerplate, because it really didn't exist, if that's what you're saying.
Yep. Sounds like you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, so I agree with that. I don't think that was clear enough to decide on. One important point I do think, though, is somebody brought in the argument about that Trump is favorable to crypto, and there is a doctrine in law that if people are in prison for something that was illegal and now it's made legal, you can't, in good conscience or even legally, keep people in prison now that the law has changed. And in fact, there's precedent. I believe that the drug people, when the law was changed, were then released because the laws had changed. Is that?
That's a really good point to bring up, actually, because I appreciate you bringing it up, because Aaron Day just wrote an article for the Brownstone Institute, which you could probably find just by Googling Aaron Day and the Brownstone Institute, talking about how there was this executive order. It was 14067. I don't even know how I remember that. And it basically allowed them to start going, attempting to make a CBDC and going after crypto people. Don't know any of the language. You can Google Biden Executive Order 14067. And you can also look up Aaron Day, Brownstone Institute, and see his most recent article. And he is saying, it's so great that Trump is in office. He overturned that executive order of Biden's, and then he's released Ross Ulbricht, but there's more people that were gone after during Biden going after people after making that executive order that he thinks Trump should release as well, including Ian. He mentioned him by name.
Right, yeah. I think that Trump, even if Ian was lawfully convicted, and I don't want to argue that he was or that he wasn't, because of the ambiguity that exists in that crypto world. I think that any prisoners that are imprisoned in the realm of crypto, notwithstanding where there are other aggravating circumstances, should just be commuted and start, and we should start with a clean slate. And the first thing you need to do is clarify everything so people know exactly, where things stand and there's no ambiguity.
Another thing that they brought up was the fact that the government, apparently the Congress, did come together to clarify stuff that's was ambiguous about cryptocurrency in January 2021, even though Ian was charged with crimes that spanned from, I think, 2016 to January 2021, so it shouldn't have fallen under that. And so that's another thing that Ian's lawyers are arguing.
And I think I know which one, but I'll let you answer. You said there was one charge that was not being contested in appeal, and I think I know what it might be, but can you tell me what that is?
It was the conspiracy to launder money charge, and the only reason, believe it or not, because I can't freaking believe it, is that there wasn't enough room left on the appeal. Yep.
Wow.
What do you
Ian's lawyers told him there's just not enough room left on the appeal, and then he learned later that he could have asked them to request to extend the room. But the thing is, Jacob Hornberger was saying, that makes no sense. All you do is delete some sentences from your other arguments and make it fit in there. I can't imagine why they wouldn't appeal all of them. And I believed until this Monday that he was appealing all of them. It's shocking.
Right. I would agree with that. There must, by what you said, I deduced there must be some Court of Appeals rule number, whatever, that says that the format of the appeal must be limited to X number of pages or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the issue is.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So that's a ridiculous dog ate my homework explanation as far as I can see.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would agree with Hornberger.
Yep.
Not that what I think matters, but I would.
I didn't really want to necessarily bring the bad news on the show, but since you asked, and
bad. I'm sorry. What is bad? What is bad about
that Ian's not getting to appeal and can never change that? He can't go back and be like, "Oh wait, my lawyer didn't let me appeal this, and I didn't know, but I want to appeal it." He just can't appeal.
Well, you can. Well, wait a minute. There's such a thing as ineffective assistance.
That's what I asked. I asked about that. I asked Jacob Hornberger, and he said he doubts that would really fly, and he said that's always a last, oh man, I have nothing else going for me. Let me try to file this kind of thing. It's like you'd probably get out of prison by the time they were done deciding that.
Yeah, very
insane.
That actually would be true. Is that? But however, it would if successful, it would remove. It would remove a conviction, as opposed to if you don't include it in the appeal, that there's no chance that it would be eliminated through the appeals process.
Yeah, so you'll just stay a felon.
Yes.
I think that's insane. I seriously sometimes think are all lawyers just completely part of the game and doing things to harm even their clients?
I can't see any way that's not true.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, Chris 777. You can't argue what on appeal. So maybe he'll respond fast enough because that's an interesting point. I know you can't relitigate the case, but I don't think I presented any question in there that qualifies as relitigating the case. On appeal, you're not trying the facts again. You're trying the law. The appeals court judges on whether the law was properly applied, not whether the jury decided the case correctly based on the facts and the law. It's just a matter of whether you got due process, as you were talking about earlier. So, I don't know if you'll.
I personally hope that the political winds changing puts Ian in a better position, and that I don't know, one way or another he gets to go home very soon.
Jacob Hornberger said that the best possible outcome he can think is that, and it's far-fetched, but he said the best thing he can think of is that these judges look at the case and say, "Oh my God, this is such a screwed up trial that in the interest of justice, we're just going to either overstep, do more than what they're being asked to do and send everything back to a new trial, or, drop all the charges." And apparently they have the power to do that.
Yeah. It would be nice if they would do something, to put it very generically.
Mm-hmm.
Very, 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 very true.
And one thing that Jacob Hornberger used ChatGPT to pull up was he asked about the past of all the judges. None of them are former prosecutors. So that's good.
That is good.
That's shocking that even just the fact that just 3 are not former prosecutors, because most judges
it's shocking you can find 3 judges in America that aren't former prosecutors. Yeah.
All 3 of Ian's in this appeal are not former prosecutors. One of them was they used to have their own private practice. The other ones are they were defense lawyers. But thank you for listening. It's been Free Talk Live. You can go to freetalklive.com for more. You can go to freeiannow.org to sign the petition to say that you think this is a travesty of justice and that Ian should be freed. Thanks for listening. Peace.
Free Talk Live.
Group of lefties who I talked to about secession, and they were of that attitude of, no, damn it, we must take back Washington, D.C. for the liberals. And, this constant struggle over power is what they're into. They're not into freedom. They're not into, independence or being able to decide for themselves.
They want to shove whatever their version of tyranny is down the other person's throat. Oh, yeah? You don't like Bush? Well, take a little Obama then.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah? You don't like Obama? How about some Donald Trump, we'll build you a wall. And the fact is that politics, it is